Chapter 263. Old Marshal Chio's thoughts raced as he watched Yun Yang with interest, wanting to see what this fellow had to say. Yun Yang pondered for a moment before he said, "Your Majesty, perhaps you can consider writing biographies for all the loyal officials who have died in the war or passed away in the Empire of Yutong. Merits don't overshadow demerits, demerits don't diminish merits. Record these people's deeds from a completely fair and objective point of view, so that these meritorious officials can leave their names in history. This is the final verdict. I think." His Majesty's eyes shone brightly. Old Marshal Chio's sharp eyes glowed with a strange glow as well. This was a marvelous plan. Be it civil or military officials, who would not want to leave their names in history after toiling their entire lives. However, how many of them had been able to leave their names in the annals of history since the beginning of time? If this were to be done, not only would the families of the meritorious officials who had passed away feel honored, the officials who were still contributing to the country would also be much more motivated. What a great idea. It was not just a matter of Yang Buotao's family. His Majesty's foresight was profound and unfathomable. This is a great idea. His Majesty praised the plan directly. It is indeed marvelous. Old Marshal Chio agreed. What about next? His Majesty pressed. Yun Yang was stunned. Tell us everything else you have in mind. Why are you keeping us in suspense? Old Marshal Chio chuckled. Next. Yun Yang scratched his head. There's no next. His Majesty was stunned while the old Marshal's expression changed. Are you toying with us? You've already taken off your pants and now you're telling your father that there's no next? Have you thought it through? However, both of their expressions turned into one of mockery. This fellow was downright slippery, and slippery was his consistent image. It wasn't surprising for him to say that there was nothing else, or perhaps it should be said that it was within reason. It was already impressive that he could come up with such an idea. In spite of this, one could infer many things from one instance. With the most basic source, everything else that followed was only a matter of course. Although Yun Yang had only mentioned the beginning, both His Majesty and Old Marshal Chio had already thought of countless things to follow the moment the matter was tossed out. Even the process involved and how to utilize it had been thought of more than one level. Once the general direction was set, the rest was only to be perfected and implemented. Yun Yang, the initiator, was not insignificant in the follow-up. Instead, it was better to have none than to have one. His Majesty, who was well versed in the art of an emperor, subconsciously thought deeper and could not help taking a long look at Yun Yang. Yun Yang's way of handling matters was meticulous and meticulous. His words were always simple and profound, his wisdom as vast as the sea. He was never greedy for achievements, nor did he lust for power or position. He was rather well versed in the ways of the world, able to advance and retreat with ease. It was truly remarkable that such a character did not wish to become an official in the imperial court. It was a pity for Yutong. It doesn't matter if there's nothing else. The follow-up to this matter is vague anyway. With your popinjay nature you won't be able to do it. However, Yun Yang, this old man has a serious question. Marshal Chio Jinhan's expression turned serious. Where did the mystical cultivation method that you cultivate come from? It seems like Marquis Yun doesn't have such an extraordinary cultivation method? Yun Yang was stunned. Ha! What ha? Do you really think this old man doesn't know what's good for him? Old Marshal Chio glared. This old man comes from the Chio family. Although I've spent most of my life on the battlefield, I can be said to be knowledgeable and knowledgeable. However, I've never seen such a mystical cultivation method. My old friend Yu Tiexin had once said that this cultivation method is absolutely unique in the world in terms of healing injuries, reviving the soul and prolonging life, expelling poisons and illnesses. Moreover, it has never appeared in the Tianshan continent for so many years. The appearance of such a cultivation method will easily cause a great disturbance. I'm asking this question today not because I want to find out your background, but because I'm worried about your safety. Since the other party dared to poison His Majesty, they will keep a close watch on His Majesty's physical condition at all times. Once they find that His Majesty has recovered, they will definitely find someone who can help His Majesty get rid of the poison. Answer me quickly so that this old man and His Majesty can plan for you. You, how could you? Yun Yang's eyes darted around as his thoughts raced. It was true that the older one was the wiser. Yun Yang truly did not expect this old man to realize something was amiss right from the start, but he had waited until His Majesty had fully recovered before he actually made things difficult for him. This old man's ability to burn bridges after crossing the river was not lacking at all. Yet, he was able to say it in such a dignified, open and above-board manner. He was filled with the words, I'm thinking for you, that's why I'm asking this question. If you don't tell the truth, then you're in the wrong. If you don't know how to be deeply grateful, then quickly tell the truth. My cultivation method is a coincidence? Yun Yang's mind raced. I learned it from my master. May I ask who your master is? Old Marshal Chiu snorted. Ling Xiaozue. Don't you all know? Didn't he come some time ago? Yun Yang pulled out an existence that he could not afford to offend and said, I thought you already knew about my relationship with him. If it wasn't for this relationship, how would I have dared to take the medicine that day? It was because I believed that my master wouldn't harm me that I revealed His Majesty's physical condition and offered the 3 spiritual medicines. If you still don't believe me, you can ask him. Old Marshal Chiu almost choked on the breath that was stuck in his throat. Yun Yang's answer was reasonable and logical. Most importantly, it was, asking me to ask Ling Xiaozue? Where the F***ck would I go to ask him? Was he someone who could be casually asked? Your words are still not entirely true. If Ling Xiaozue had cultivated this cultivation method, his achievements would have long surpassed this. Qiu Jianhan glared at Yun Yang. Besides, since when did Ling Xiaozue become your master? Yun Yang said seriously, Old Marshal, the cultivation method that Yun Yang cultivated was marvelous. You were the one who said it. My master's cultivation base level was also determined by you. This junior is not qualified enough to comment. I can only say that I have not spoken a single word of falsehood. Qiu Jianhan retorted angrily, don't try to use words with this old man. That's what this old man has done. Do you think that this old man doesn't know that everything you've said is a lie? Yin Yang rolled his eyes. The title of the leader of Yutong's 3 top rogues was indeed well deserved. Even his covert words had been heard, but so what if this old man had heard them? Would he dare to bite him in his face? His Majesty could not help chuckling and said, forget it. It's always a good thing for a junior to have such an opportunity. Old Marshal, you really don't have to take it to heart. Not a single word of truth comes out of this child's mouth. Qiu Jianhan sighed and did not speak further. He thought, Your Majesty, there are many things you don't know. My suspicions aren't limited to the cultivation method he cultivates. What he did not know was that His Majesty had a vague thought in his mind. Yun Yang was magnanimous and had no intention of becoming an official despite his extraordinary intelligence. However, everything he had done previously had been on Yutong's side. Even if he could not recruit such a person, he could not be pushed too far. It was obvious that His Majesty's evaluation of Yun Yang was extremely high. He was already treating him like an otherworldly expert. When Yun Yang finally excused himself, he realized that he was drenched in cold sweat. Is Old Marshal suspecting me? Yun Yang thought to himself. His actions today aren't because he suspects that I have ill intentions. He's directly suspecting if I'm one of the 9 Supremes or if I belong to the 9 Heavens dictum. He left the residence of Qiu Jianhan with a heavy heart and did not return to the residence of Yun. Instead, he went to find out where Yang Buotao's wife was buried. Silently, he buried Yang Buotao's ashes on his wife's grave. Your family is reunited from now on, meet again in the netherworld. Yun Yang stood quietly for a moment and murmured, there are no more schemes in the netherworld, no father who would harm his own son. Yang Buotao, if there's a next life, I believe you'll still be a good man. Mistress Yang, your husband has always been a good man, a good son. There's no need for you to be ashamed of marrying him. I am Supreme Cloud, I wish you both well and solemnly inform you that the 9 Supremes have no ill feelings towards you and your wife anymore. The grudges are settled, the past grudges are forgotten, everything written off. May the heavens bless us and we shall be good friends in our next lives. The wind was soft, the wild grass beside the grave swayed softly. It was as if Yang Buotao and his wife were waving goodbye to Yun Yang. There's no need to linger in the secular world, reincarnate as soon as possible. Forget the regrets of this life and start the legend of a hero again. Yun Yang bowed slightly, straightened himself and turned to walk away. He had only taken a few steps when he noticed a few people walking towards him with quick steps. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. A gust of wind blew, stirring up a cloud of dust to cover the new soil he had just stirred up. He then hid in a dark corner. It was Shangguan Lingxiu accompanied by 2 guards. Yin Yang was surprised. Why was Shangguan Lingxiu here at this time? Chapter 264. Shangguan Lingxiu came to Mistress Yang's grave and placed incense, candles and other offerings. She opened a pot of wine but did not speak for a long time. She stood there quietly for a long time before she poured the entire pot of wine in front of the grave and said softly, Sister Wan, I miss you so much. She sighed softly and said, rest in peace. I won't speak ill of Yang Buotao in front of you. I hope that if your spirit is still here, come to my dreams. We sisters will talk again. She stood there saying goodbye, but she did not leave. Instead, she heaved a long sigh. All of you can leave now. Wait for me at the foot of the hill over there. Let me be alone here for a while. The two guards responded and walked further and further away. Watching as the guard left, Shangguan Lingxiu heaved another long sigh. From Yun Yang's perspective, Shangguan Lingxiu seemed to have lost all her energy as she slowly sat down in front of Mistress Yang's grave. Sister Wan, you're much older than me. It's overstepping my boundaries to call you sister, but this is the Shangguan family's seniority. If I really call you Auntie, it's not good. When we met the other day, you used your status as an older sister to tease me. If I were to be a generation lower than you, I'm afraid I'd be ruined by you. Shangguan Lingxiu's beautiful face was tinged with a hint of nostalgia. She hugged her knees as she sat in front of the grave, a rare tenderness on her face. She looked unusually pitiful, with an inexplicable sense of loneliness. Apart from that, there was also a kind of feminine grace that appeared unexpectedly. Her charm was difficult to describe, difficult to draw, difficult to write, and difficult to describe. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat as he watched the scene unfold before him. It was the first time he had seen such gentleness and delicacy in this girl from a family of generals. When you were alive, I never spoke my mind when we chatted. Truth be told, I couldn't say it and I couldn't say it. In this world, I have no one to confide in. I can only tell you now. I hope you won't blame me. A few days ago when we were talking, you told me to find a husband as soon as possible and settle your marriage. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at the white clouds in the sky and said sadly, I said then that I don't have such thoughts. You even tried to persuade me for a long time, but the Shangguan family of generals is filled with old people and young people. I can still manage it. If I were to marry out, what would happen to these people at home? You asked me if I have anyone I like. You said that a woman's life is only complete when she's married and has children. How could I not know that you're right? You're not the only one who said that. My grandmother, auntie, and mother have all told me the same thing, Shangguan Lingxiu mumbled softly, but the Shangguan family can't do without me now. Although my grandmother and the rest still look strong and healthy, I know that they can't hold on any longer. Even if their bodies can still hold on, their hearts are already weary. I can feel a strong will to die from each and every one of them. When the case of the family of generals was brought up again, even when the truth was revealed, it made their hearts even more disheartened. I used to think that a person's heart was as dead as death, but it turns out that a person's heart can really be this disheartened. I'm the only one of the younger generation of the general now. I can't watch the Shangguan family of generals disappear just like that, even though I'm only a girl. I'm still a Shangguan after all. I'm 21 this year. My friends who used to play with me are all married now and living happily. Sometimes they'll bring their children to visit me at home. Those little fellows are quite cute. It's just that as for someone I like. Which girl doesn't have someone they like? It's a pity that Do you still remember young Master Yun from the Marquis of Heavenly Cloud's family? Shangguan Lingxiu's voice grew softer and softer. He's really helped me a lot during this period of time. He's not the popinjay that the rumors say he is. He's a very good man. Yun Yang is worthy of any girl's lifetime commitment. Sister Wan, you know me, I'm straightforward. If I wasn't a woman of the Shangguan family, if my father and brothers were still here, I would have told him long ago. Whether it's a success or not, whether he likes me or not, I would have told him. If he doesn't like me, I'll let go and continue to like him on my own, but I won't force him to like me. If he likes me too, then we'll be together. However, my identity doesn't allow me to do so. He's so excellent in his bones. He's so bright, so chivalrous, so courageous. I believe there must be many girls who like him, and I can't do anything but watch from afar. Perhaps one day, I'll watch him marry another girl and live happily ever after while I can only watch from afar. My nephews are still young now. It'll take at least 7 to 8 years for them to grow up and be able to shoulder the burden of this family. By then, I'll be almost 30. In the empire of Yutong, a lady who remains unmarried at the age of 30, it seems like there are too few of them all these years. Even if I had not changed my mind then, how could I have expected him to be single? One should not have such an extravagant wish. Sister Wan, but can you understand? The pain in my heart. 2 soft pats could be heard as Shangguan Lingxiu's tears fell to the ground. No matter how strong I act, I'm still a woman after all, Shangguan Lingxiu said softly, You've once said that a woman will only be stronger when she has a place to return to in her heart. Only then will she know what happiness is. But all of this doesn't belong to me. To me it's too far away. Now that your fragrant soul has faded away, you can finally relax. You don't have to worry about anything in the future. No matter how bad Marshall Yang is going to be, you won't be able to hear it. Actually, the bitter days of your life will only last for a few days. After that, it will be over forever. Although such a life isn't perfect, it's enough to make others admire you. Because I have to continue holding on to endure. I know that there's no end to it, but I have to grit my teeth and carry on. I have to pretend to be cold and hard in the eyes of others just like a man. There's no one I can talk to about the weakness in my heart, there's no one I can rely on. From today onwards, I won't say these words to anyone anymore. I don't know how many people there are in this world. Every day I'm in the crowd of Tiantang City, but I still feel so lonely. It's like I'm the only one in this world walking alone. Alone, not knowing where my goal is, not knowing where the front is, not knowing where the end is. Day after day I'm forever alone. Sister One, it's so hard. Her voice gradually became softer and softer. Only the soft sound of tears dripping onto the ground could be heard. Yun Yang hid behind a tree, concealing himself, but he could not help feeling waves of bitterness wash over him. Indeed, there had never been a woman in history who was as lonely and heavy as Shangguan Lingxiu was now. She was still trying her best to hold on. The entire family's responsibilities were all on this frail woman's shoulders. She could not let it go, she could not move, she could not hold on, but she had to persevere. She walked forward with great effort. There was no space or possibility for her to think about her marriage. Thinking about it was just a fantasy. Only when the younger generation of this family could truly stand tall could Shangguan Lingxiu be freed. Yun Yang heaved a long sigh in his heart. Time flew by quickly. Half an hour passed just like that. Shangguan Lingxiu stood up, her tall frame standing for a moment in melancholy. She then bowed solemnly and left. After a dozen steps and a turn, she took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. Suddenly, she puffed up her chest and left in large strides, regaining her usual demeanor as a noble lady from a family of generals. She was like a general who had stepped onto the battlefield, so sharp and resolute. Her footsteps were sonorous, full of vigor. Watching Shangguan Lingxiu's slender silhouette disappear into the distance, watching as she faced the world with her cold arrogance and unyielding demeanor, Yun Yang watched silently, feeling waves of emotions in his heart. This woman had not had it easy. If Yun Yang had been an ordinary person, or if he had been a little more soft-hearted, he might have gone over to confess his love and even clapped. After all, that was human nature. However, Yun Yang had remained silent and did not come out. He did not know what he could say if he came out. What could he do? To be fair, Yun Yang had not thought about his marriage at all. Based on this alone, Yun Yang could not even compare to Shangguan Lingxiu or Ji Lingxi. At least the two ladies knew what he wanted. At most, they had not acted on it due to certain restraints. However, Yun Yang really had no thoughts. Yun Yang had no thoughts about Ji Lingxi who had left, nor did he have any thoughts about Shangguan Lingxiu now. His entire focus was on his revenge. Since the day Yun Yang had inexplicably returned to his senses, there was only one strong thought that filled his mind. His brothers were all dead and he was the only one who had survived. He was too busy with his revenge. How could he have the time and leisure to care about love and romance? If he had really done that, would he still be human? Would he still be human? Even after 100 years, how could he face his brothers in the underworld? In spite of this, watching Shangguan Lingxiu leave quietly, Yun Yang unexpectedly felt a heavy weight in his heart. Should he chase after her and comfort her? Forget it. He was going up against the Four Seasons Tower, the most terrifying force in the entire Tianshan continent. He might just die one day if he was not careful. Since he did not have the ability to guarantee anything to the lady, what was the point of provoking her and giving her false hope? Chapter 265. Yun Yang was touched, comforted and envious of his fifth brother and sister Yu's love, but he also felt pity for Yun Zuyu's loneliness for the rest of her life. It was better not to let something like this happen to someone close to him. It was better to forget each other in the present than to help each other in times of need. This adaptation seemed to be very suitable for the current situation. Qiu Yun-san brought along 10 experts from the Qiu family while Xia Bingchuan also brought another 10 experts from the Xia family. They had been waiting at the residence of Yun for a long time. They had been waiting anxiously for a long time. Now that they had finally seen Yun Yang return, they were overjoyed and welcomed him in ecstasy. "Boss, you're back. In spite of this, the 20 ace cultivators from the two families were filled with suspicion when they saw Yunyang return. This child did not look like a beast tamer of an ace or above. Could he really make mystical beasts break through their limits and advance like humans could not? Could it be that his young master had been deceived? Any cultivator with a little more experience in the martial world would have such doubts. After all, Yunyang was too young. No matter how outstanding his appearance was, it could not erase the reality of his young age. One of the characteristics of an ace beast tamer was that they had a lot of experience. This was something that Yunyang could not achieve at his age. Yunyang's mood was unusually heavy. With a snort, he ignored the both of them and returned to his room. He left the two young masters outside, looking at each other in confusion. The guard's reaction was one of rage. Why was this fellow so rude? Did he not know who we were? We were the elites of the Chiu family and Xia family. Based on our identity and cultivation base, even a duke or a sect leader would not dare to look down on us like this when so many of us were together. Just as the group was about to flare up, they were pacified by Chiu Yunsan and Xia Bingxuan. Both of them knew very well that if their guards had really offended Yunyang today, there would be no hope of training the mystical beasts. Boss Yunyang had never been someone who was easy to talk to. At this moment, another group of people arrived at the door in a hurry. "Where's boss?" The person who spoke was Chun Wanfeng. At this moment, Chun Wanfeng was also carrying a small mystical beast cub in his arms. It was in the form of a small tiger, and its fur was brightly colored, but it exuded a tenderness that made one want to touch it very much. Not to mention anything else, just based on this appearance, the Xian beast cubs that Chun Wanfeng brought along had already beaten Xia and Chiu to the bottom of the valley. Relatively incompetent. Following Chun Wanfeng's entrance was a dejected and unhappy fellow. It was none other than the last of the four noble young masters, Dong Tianling. This fellow had come alone this time. His elder brother had come by himself. "Where's boss?" Dong Tianling asked the same question as Chun Wanfeng. Xia Bingxuan and Chiu Yunsan rolled their eyes, hugging their mystical beasts and ignoring him. "It's fine if you're hugging a Xian beast, but why are you asking if you're not hugging a Xian beast? Can't you see that we're in a bad mood?" Actually, it was not only Xia and Chiu who were upset. The experts from the Xia and Chiu families wore an unprecedentedly solemn expression as their gazes focused on the tiger cub in Chun Wanfeng's arms. There were even a few of them who were deeply envious. Chun Wanfeng's little tiger did not just surpass the mystical beast cubs of the two families in terms of appearance. This was obviously a pure combat type 8th level pinnacle mystical beast, the black-winged tiger. Once this mystical beast entered the growth stage, a pair of wings would grow on both sides of its body. Although this pair of wings could not allow the tiger to soar in the sky, it was a symbol that distinguished it from other mystical beasts. Other than the unusually sturdy pair of wings that could be used as a weapon to kill enemies, it could also be used for a short period of gliding. Traversing mountains and rivers was but a walk in the park. It was not difficult for it to even ride the wind. Other than that, the black-winged tiger had another innate skill, which was the ability to shoot sharp air arrows from its mouth. Not only was it indestructible, it was also incredibly accurate. It was a phenomenal representation of precision among the mystical beasts. This was definitely an elite combat mystical beast that was hard to come by. Whether it was the Xia family's 10,000 catty bear or the Chiu family's 3-eye boar, they could not be compared to this black-winged tiger at all. "Boss." Chun Wanfeng was riding on the crest of success. He was proud of himself, high-spirited and coquettish as he called out at the top of his lungs. "Young master is resting." Fang Mafei's muscular form appeared beside him and said faintly, "Please wait for a moment." Once Fang Mafei appeared, a powerful aura surged from him, immediately attracting the attention of the guards and experts from the three noble families. An 8th level pinnacle mystical cultivator. Almost everyone had a wary look on their faces. Although their cultivation base was not weaker than this fellow in front of them, and some of them were even stronger, the sudden appearance of such an ace cultivator in the residence of a secular young master like Yunyang was beyond everyone's expectations. Lao Mei also stood out from the pavilion under the flowering trees. Everyone was shocked to see him. It was another level 8 master. Although the cultivation base of the person who appeared later was slightly weaker than the previous one, he was still a solid 8th peak cultivator. Were ace cultivators so worthless now that there were two of them working here so casually? However, surprises came one after another. "In the wing." Baishua said lazily, "Those who come are guests. Everyone please do as you please. There's no need to be restrained." The voice came slowly, its tone indifferent. However, a mountain-like pressure surged from where the voice came from, filling the entire residence of Yun like it was falling on top of them. The 30 ace cultivators from the 3 families were shocked. This was obviously a pinnacle cultivator who had surpassed 10th perfection. A mere marquis's residence actually had such a supreme cultivator guarding it. Had they really become frogs at the bottom of a well? For a moment, everyone was at a loss. Had they come to the residence of a marquis's young master in the secular world? Or had they come to the concourse of the underworld? Or was it the headquarters of the 5 top sects? Was there a higher level of combat power here that had yet to be revealed? What's more, the so-called Shen beast cub breaking through its own limits was actually true. In such a strange and unpredictable place, perhaps it was true. The arrogance in everyone's heart was suddenly gone, not a single drop remaining. They even became cautious. At this moment, Yun Yang was in his room, standing in front of the window, watching the 30 experts from the 3 noble families with a solemn expression. Although the 3 noble families' escorting of the mystical beasts was to ensure that the mystical beast cubs that they had painstakingly obtained would not be lost, it was too much for them to deploy such a large force. A few 9th peak cultivators had even been sent out. Most of them probably had other intentions. That was why Yun Yang had sent Bai Yixue to intimidate them, to completely wipe out the 3 noble families' schemes before they could sprout. If they were to fall out immediately, there would be no benefit to his subsequent plans. It would only expose his true capabilities. As long as these people were here, even if he were to fight with the 4 Seasons Tower's experts, these people would not just stand by and watch. They were still counting on him to nurture the mystical beasts. However, Yun Yang had no intention of going out today. Firstly, after killing the 4 Seasons Tower's ace cultivator with all his wind blades, Yun Yang could clearly feel that his endless divine art was restless again. He needed to sort it out before he could be at ease. Secondly, it was also, there were too many things that had happened during this period of time. They were too complicated and messy, they needed to be sorted out carefully as well. Shui Wuyin was still sorting out the tasks that Yun Yang had assigned to him, looking very haggard. However, the 9 Heavens dictum was already on the right track under his reorganization, displaying its outstanding potential. Although he did not bring them out in the open nor did he gather all of them together, these people could only be of great use in the dark. If they were to be exposed in broad daylight, they might not be of any use when facing a colossus like the 4 Seasons Tower, they would only be targeted and annihilated. Shui Wuyin had slowly made the 9 Heavens dictum subordinates realize that Lord Supreme Wind was the one in charge now by issuing orders continuously. Then he would organize them step by step through his orders. Although the process was long and tedious, there were no hidden dangers. He would provoke hatred from time to time, igniting everyone's desire for revenge. Occasionally he would describe the future. It was undeniable that Shui Wuyin was indeed an expert at manipulating tactics. Through his various methods, the 9 Heavens dictum's people were now more efficient and the various departments had begun to work together. There were rarely any conflicts. It was a miracle to be able to achieve this without meeting the higher-ups and without any strong restraints. At least, Yun Yang knew that it was not easy for him to achieve this. As Bai Yixue called out, the people from the 3 noble families waited quietly in the residence of Yun's yard. The weather was a little chilly, but it was not a big deal to these ace mystical cultivators. Moreover, the spiritual qi in the residence of Yun was far superior to other places and was not much inferior to an ordinary paradise. Staying here was beneficial to them and they were happy to see it happen. It was one thing to be willing to stay, but everyone was still puzzled. This young Master Yun had returned to his room with a dark expression, as if someone had owed him a fortune. What was the reason for this? It was already afternoon, but Yun Yang had yet to come out. Instead, an outsider had come. This is the residence of Marquis Yun? May I ask if young Master Yun Yang is here? A clear voice rang from the door. Everyone who heard the voice was stunned as they looked towards the source of the voice. A man in green with a large bird on his left and a thin dark-faced youth on his right stood at the door of the yard with a smile on his face. He had already entered the door without being invited. Chapter 266. The newcomer glanced around and was shocked to see so many people gathered in the yard. Moreover, they were all high-level cultivators. He could not help but twitch his eyebrows. Obviously, it was beyond his expectations. Upon closer inspection, he saw that there were many familiar faces among them. They were from 3 of the spring, summer, autumn, and winter noble families. It was obvious that the newcomer did not expect the elites and experts of the 3 noble families to gather here in such numbers. What were they trying to do? Could it be that they were here to ambush him? The newcomer could not help but turn to look at the plaque on the door. His face was filled with uncertainty. Was this the residence of Yun, or one of the four noble families? After all, the lineup of 30 high-level cultivators from the three families was too frightening. Even if the newcomer thought highly of himself, he was not confident that he could go up against so many experts. Once the battle broke out, it would be wishful thinking to even escape unscathed. The few ninth-peak cultivators from the three noble families were shocked to see the newcomer. They stood up with a whoosh, one of them exclaiming, "Brother Gu? Why are you here?" Brother Gu was puzzled as well. "I'm here to run some errands. What are the few of you doing here?" At this moment, both parties looked at each other, each filled with questions. Gugu, the youth dressed in black, was looking around as he asked, "Eldest senior brother, who are these people? Why are they gathered here?" Brother Wei said in a low voice, "They're from the spring, summer, autumn, and winter noble families. Each of them is a top-notch expert. Don't act rashly later and be more careful with your words." Gugu's eyes darted around as he asked, "May I ask why all the seniors are gathered here? I wonder if you can satisfy my curiosity?" One of the Spring family's experts frowned upon hearing the question but answered carefully, "Brother Wei, may I ask who this is?" Brother Wei smiled helplessly and said, "This is your humble junior brother. He's young and insensible. If he's offended you, please forgive him." Everyone forced a smile. The reason why everyone had gathered here was because of the four great young masters' message. It was said that the owner of this place had the means to cultivate high-level profound beast cubs to break through their own shackles. Every family had gathered here with the intention of giving it a try. Even though this experiment had yet to be verified, the implications were huge. If the matter of cultivation was true, it would definitely rewrite the power structure of the profound sky continent. It could be said to be a major event among major events. If it was possible, not only would they not respond to that youth's question, they would directly kill him to silence him. However, everyone knew that Brother Wei's cultivation base had already reached the level of 10th perfection, and he had the backing of a powerful sect. He wasn't someone who could be easily dealt with. Even if he was difficult to deal with, the matter of training the young mystical beasts was too important. There were 30 top-notch experts from three families here. If they worked together, they could take care of him. As long as they did it cleanly, even if the sect wanted to investigate, it would be difficult to find any clues. However, other than his own tyrannical power, this man also had a peak 9th grade spiritual beast as his mount. It was a flying spiritual beast. When the man and the bird joined forces, their battle prowess was basically equivalent to surpassing the level of 10th perfection. Although the three great clans could still kill them with this strength, they would definitely have to pay an extremely heavy price. Even though the three noble families said that they were on the same side and that they were on the same side in this matter, it was not worth it to pay such a heavy price. Especially when they only knew that the owner of this place had the ability to train and cultivate mystical beasts, they had not witnessed it with their own eyes. Naturally, they would not act rashly. "We have come to Tiantang City for a vacation this time." One of them chuckled dryly and said, "Coincidentally, the young masters of our families are here, so we all came to take a look. As for other intentions, there is none. I wonder if this young master has any other questions? We can answer them one by one." Gugu said in an odd tone, "That is true, but I have been to Tiantang City before. At that time, the four young masters were here as well, but why didn't the seniors come then? It has only been a few days since I left last time, and now the seniors have suddenly come," a thin and lean elder from the Chun family said faintly. "It's only by chance that we've come here. It's a coincidence that we've met each other, and it's also a coincidence that we've met both of you. If there weren't many coincidences in this world, wouldn't it be boring? Besides, even if we're here for other matters, we don't seem to have the obligation to report to the young master." Obviously, Gugu's probing had already annoyed these people. "We are all people of status. What do you take us for when you ask like this?" Gugu was insulted, but he was not annoyed. He continued, "It is indeed a coincidence. However, your matters have nothing to do with this humble one. The owner of this place, the residence of Heavenly Cloud's young master Yun, is an acquaintance of mine." The faces of over 30 people froze at the same time. "You are Yun Yang's friend?" At this moment, a voice suddenly called out in surprise, "Gugu?" The crowd was stunned. Gugu? Could it be that a pigeon had come from somewhere? Yun Yang was dressed in purple, his elegant smile like the pure stream of an iceberg as he walked out with quick steps. As his purple robe fluttered, there was a sense of mystery. Yun Yang saw Gugu, his eldest senior brother, and a sense of danger welled up in his heart. How could he not know that trouble had arrived? However, how could he solve this trouble? Yunyang could only take one step at a time. The best choice was, of course, to muddle through. Gugu? It's really you? I thought I was mistaken. Yunyang laughed, his expression extremely joyful. I've missed you so much these few days. When I woke up that day you were already gone. Why didn't you wake me up when you left? A certain someone was becoming more and more thick-skinned. His words were flirtatious, and the hidden meaning in his words was thought-provoking. Before Yunyang's voice echoed in the air, he went forward to hug Gugu's shoulder. It was obvious that he was going to get physical after flirting with her. Gugu dodged quickly and said angrily, Yunyang, what nonsense are you talking about? Show some respect. Yunyang quickly retracted his hand and smiled awkwardly. I didn't notice just now. Why are there so many people around? There's usually no one in my house, it's just an accident. Haha, when there's no one around. On the other side, the eldest senior brother was already dumbfounded, stunned on the spot. What did he say? I missed you so much. What's going on? Could it be a deep-rooted yearning? When I woke up that day you were already gone. What did this mean? You didn't even wake me up when you left the last time? What's going on now? Could it be that both of you slept on the same bed the last time? Otherwise, why would this happen? Hugging as soon as they came up. How casual could it be? There's usually no one in my house. Could it be that getting physical is your usual way of getting along? When there's no one around. What do you want to do when there's no one around? The eldest senior brother was puzzled, feeling more and more terrified the more he thought about it. This matter was really frightening when one thought about it carefully. Looking at Yunyang's handsome and elegant face, his tall stature that was like a pine tree as he stood, his gaze seemed to be filled with endless affection. A worldly young master, an elegant and beautiful youth, the praise was well deserved. If his junior sister were to change into female clothing and return to her original appearance, she would be a perfect match with this young Master Yun. This was the so-called perfect combination of pearls and jade, a perfect fit. Brother Wei stroked his chin, deep in thought. Yin. Gugu was so angry that the color on her face changed. Don't talk nonsense. My identity last time was that of an envoy. What are you trying to do by spouting nonsense? Yunyang nodded like he was pecking rice. Of course. An envoy. You told me that day that's your identity on the surface. I know it. The expressions on everyone's faces grew even more ambiguous. We called each other brothers back then. It's been a long time since we last met. Is this how young Master Yun treats his brothers? Gugu tried hard to salvage her image and pretended to be generous. However, this boldness only added to the discordant atmosphere. Of course. Yunyang squinted his eyes and said, Brother Gu, it's been a long time since we last met. Have you been well? I've missed you even more. Come, it's rare that you're here today. Please come in and have a cup of tea. I've picked it especially for you. Hearing that every word of his was deliberately misleading others, Gugu's dark face flushed red with anger. Yunyang, you're despicable. You're shameless. Yunyang chuckled and said in a seemingly indulgent manner, Yes, I'm despicable, I'm shameless, I'm unreasonable. A few people from the three noble families could not help but chuckle. They were all experienced martial artists, who could not hear the mockery in his words. Gugu's expression grew even more twisted as she spat hatefully, Yunyang, you bastard. Yunyang's gesture of offering his hand to Gugu stopped abruptly. He did not speak anymore. After a long time, he looked at Gugu with a hint of sadness in his eyes. The corners of his lips curled into a cold, formulaic smile as if he had suddenly suffered an unprecedented blow. He said faintly, Brother Gu, this is? Gugu was still huffing and puffing in anger. Closing her eyes, she uttered each word in a low voice, Yunyang, don't you dare taint my clean reputation. What are you saying, Brother Gu? Yunyang immediately put on a reserved smile that kept people at arm's length. He raised his head and said in a low voice, Brother Gu's reputation, of course, as an elder brother, I will do my best to protect it. I don't need Brother Gu to remind me again and again. Forget it, you've come from afar. Give me this face and allow me to serve you a cup of tea before we talk about anything else. He raised his head proudly as if he had been hurt, but he was desperately trying to maintain his dignity and pride. He lifted his chin and said coldly, I understand. Our two countries are at war, you and I are enemies. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. If you're not even willing to give me this face, please do as you please. He smiled coldly, pointed and said, the gate is over there. The gate that leads out of the city. Walk south after you exit the gate. Please do as you please. Chapter 267. Gugu's face was contorted with rage, her entire body trembling. Brother Wei, who was beside her, stood up quickly and said with a smile, "Is this young Master Yun? I'm Gugu's eldest senior brother. My surname is Wei." Yun Yang looked surprised and a little awkward, like he wanted to please but did not know how to do it. He desperately wanted to leave a good impression on his sweetheart's family but could not change his expression at the moment. This eldest senior brother? I don't know. Quick, please come in. It's like it's your own home when you're here." As he spoke, he actually smiled shyly and scratched his head helplessly. He looked like an innocent young man. Gugu was so angry that she was about to vomit blood. Looking at her eldest senior brother being pulled by Yun Yang and about to step in, she screamed, "Eldest senior brother, don't bother with him. He's not a good person." The eldest senior brother subconsciously looked at Yun Yang, only to see Yun Yang's sorrowful expression that was forcefully suppressing his emotions. His gaze dimmed slightly as he said softly, "Gugu, I know that I shouldn't have done that. It's reasonable for you to be angry. But I'm still Yutong's man after all." He smiled bitterly and turned to say, "We're from two different worlds. Eldest senior brother, please take Gugu away. This is Yutong's territory. If you stay too long you'll inevitably get in the way. You don't have the status of an envoy like last time anymore." He lowered his head. "Take care. In the future. Take care." His appearance, especially that sorrowful look on his face, was truly bone-piercing. The eldest senior brother could not help but feel that he had understood a lot more as he watched. He could not help but feel that his junior sister's actions were a little overboard and too heartless. Was there anything that he did not understand in the current situation? Both of them were a golden couple who had fallen in love at first sight. However, due to the fact that they were from two different countries, two different worlds, and both of their identities and backgrounds, they had forcefully suppressed their feelings. However, they were still a young man and woman after all. They could not suppress their emotions when they saw each other again. Therefore, both of them had been in constant conflict and repetition when they were together. Yun Yang had just said that he should not have done that. What was that thing? Eldest senior brother's heart was as clear as a mirror hanging high above. Why had he and Gugu traveled between 3 countries? Wasn't it because of the soul-locking needles incident? As for Gugu, she had left one for Yun Yang. According to Gugu herself, she had intended to ambush Yun Yang with this needle, but now it seemed that the truth might not be so. In the past, there was deep affection for an old sword. What was in front of him might be deep affection for an old needle. As for Yun Yang using this soul-sealing spike to ambush people from other countries, causing a major misunderstanding between Dongxian and other countries and Gugu's anger. However, the main reason for her anger was not as Gugu had said, that her skills were inferior and she was enraged. Instead, it was because her beloved had used and deceived her. All these things were so obvious, so logical, so natural. Looking at Gugu, who was trembling with rage, tears almost falling from her eyes, looking at Yun Yang's guilt-ridden and sorrowful expression, eldest senior brother could not help but want to sigh. Since the beginning of time, the word love is the most tiring. My old friend did not lie to me. Since you're already here, I'll have to trouble you with this cup of tea no matter what. Eldest senior brother smiled warmly. I wonder if it's convenient for young Master Yun. Yun Yang looked flattered. Of course. Convenient. Even if it's inconvenient, it must be convenient. Then he tried to make way for Yun Yang eagerly. All that was left was for them to hold hands and walk together. If Gugu were to remove her disguise now, her pretty face that was pale from anger would not look much better than a dead person. She was panting heavily, her feet like they were nailed to the ground. Her eyes were fixed on Yun Yang, wishing that she could swallow him whole. Eldest senior brother pulled Gugu's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Gugu, don't be impulsive. Have you forgotten why we're here?" As he finished, he pulled Gugu along and walked in. Eldest senior brother was still more rational than emotional regarding the current situation. No matter how entangled they were, the conflict of being enemies would always exist. No matter how despicable and shameless Yun Yang's method of using the soul-sealing spike was, or how despicable it was, since both parties were enemies, it was only natural that he would resort to all kinds of tricks and schemes. Judging from the current outcome, if it were not for their standpoint, the eldest senior brother would even praise Yun Yang's actions. Yun Yang's move was simply brilliant, to the point of perfection. Gugu was really afraid that she would not be able to catch her breath and die. Her stomach was already bloated and could explode at any time, but she still had to follow them impassively. Eldest senior brother was right. If they did not go in directly, then what was the point of coming to Yutong this time? How could they solve the current predicament? If they were to go back in anger, then wouldn't it be foolish to come here? They had traveled thousands of miles just to take a stroll? This was simply preposterous. Thinking deeper, Yunyang, this despicable bastard, had done this to muddy the waters, confuse the public, fish in troubled waters, and even reap benefits from the chaos. Gugu would never let him succeed. However, this bastard's pretentious act was a true actor. Her eldest senior brother had obviously believed his sweet words and believed that he had an affair with her. This was what Gugu could not accept the most. It was worse than eating a fly. Her gaze towards Yunyang grew more and more ferocious, wishing that she could pounce on him and bite him to vent her anger. Everyone, please wait a moment. Yunyang casually greeted the people from the four noble families and walked towards his own courtyard. Eldest senior brother and Gugu followed behind him. One was calm and elegant while the other had her head lowered, involuntarily looking at her stomach. She felt that her stomach was about to explode from anger, but she still had to suppress it, afraid that her eldest senior brother would fall for the despicable man's other tricks. Behind them, the experts of the three great clans all had a look of understanding on their faces. That was obviously a young couple throwing a tantrum. Just by looking at how shy they were and how they didn't dare to raise their heads, it was obvious. Yes, that was it. However, Dong Tianling, Chun Wanfeng and the rest felt that something was not right. This matter seemed a little strange. Since when did their eldest have anything to do with this girl? If there was, it was impossible for us not to know about it. Besides, it seemed like someone like their eldest brother, even if he really liked this girl, it was impossible for him to have such an attitude. It was more like an act. It was true that we, the four popinjays, needed this to hit on girls, but someone like their eldest brother did not need to go through so much trouble. He only needed to wait for the girl to hit on him and that would be it. To be so submissive, there must be something fishy going on. The four noble young masters looked at each other, winking at each other. That was why it was said that even a wise man would make a mistake at times, and a fool would be right at times. This saying was indeed true. Even the most experienced person in Jianghu could be blinded by a single leaf, and even the foppish trash could see through the truth at times. Eldest senior brother, cough. I don't know if I can call you that. Yunyang was a little embarrassed. May I know your name? The eldest senior brother smiled warmly. My surname is Wei. Danger as in danger, this surname is very rare. My name is Wei Xinglu. You can call me eldest senior brother like Gugu does. Eldest senior brother Wei. Yunyang said, it's an honor to meet you. Wei Xinglu smiled faintly. I've long heard that young Master Yun is a dragon among men. Seeing you today, you're indeed elegant and extraordinary. Yunyang laughed. Eldest senior brother is flattering me. I say that eldest senior brother is the outstanding one among men. The school of spring and autumn is famous in the martial world. Eldest senior brother's prestige has spread far and wide. This young brother has always yearned to join the school of spring and autumn and be with eldest senior brother all the time. Wei Xinglu laughed and thought to himself, this child must be dying to join the school of spring and autumn and be with his junior sister all the time. It's rare for him to use me as a cover. Gugu scoffed and said, how dare a piece of trash like you dream of entering the school of spring and autumn? Even if you were to enter, you're only fit to be a janitor. With such an identity, it's already enough to bring honor to your ancestors. Yunyang looked like he was swallowing the insult and said, Gugu is right. My aptitude is really average. It's wishful thinking, it's just wishful thinking. Wei Xinglu could not stand it anymore and said, Gugu, how can a girl like you talk like this? You've already spoken so carelessly in front of everyone just now. How can you still be like this now? Wei Xinglu's voice was very strict, filled with the intention of lecturing. Gugu's voice was very stern, filled with the intention of lecturing. Yunyang chimed in, Gugu's character has always been straightforward. Eldest senior brother need not mind it. There are no outsiders here. Wei Xinglu smiled, becoming more and more satisfied with this junior sister's sweetheart. He especially agreed with the words, there are no outsiders here. He thought to himself that his junior sister had a strong character and it was rare for this young Master Yin to have a gentle and tolerant personality. They really brought out the best in each other, a perfect match. Regardless of anything else, just thinking about the two of them together, it was already great that his junior sister would not suffer any losses in her lifetime. Moreover, although this young Master Yun had said that his aptitude was average, his actual aptitude was definitely extraordinary. At such a young age, he already had the cultivation base of the sixth peak of mystical qi. Moreover, the extent of the mystical qi's undulation showed that he was about to break through. In other words, This child was extremely likely to make another breakthrough in the near future and advance to the 7th peak of mystical chi. That would not be easy at all. Not to mention the others. Just looking at the genius disciples in the school of spring and autumn, how could they have such a cultivation base when they were at young Master Yun's age? Putting all the above together, this young Master Yun not only had an outstanding appearance, but his aptitude was excellent as well. He was also hardworking and had a good temper. Even his family background was not bad. Although it was still not enough to match his junior sister, it was already very good. How good would be considered good? Chapter 268. Although the problem between the two of them was that they belonged to two opposing countries, this was something that was difficult to resolve from the point of view of the common people. However, as long as the two of them truly loved each other, these problems were not big problems. There was a lot of room to maneuver. Yunyang loved Gugu deeply, but he still chose to do what he had to do for the country and people. So much so that he felt so guilty. This was clearly a man's performance of responsibility. Just this point alone was already very rare and precious. Young Master Yun is wise and resourceful. His previous plan has caused Gugu to suffer a lot. Wei Xinglu laughed. Since he had already made up his mind, he naturally had to defend his junior sister. After all, from Wei Xinglu's point of view, everything else didn't matter. What national campaigns, what conspiracies for these super sects that were detached from the secular world, for these experts who were above the mortals. They weren't worth mentioning. As for the misunderstanding that Yunyang had created, the most serious one was the one between a man and a woman with Gugu. That was the most important and needed to be solved quickly. Otherwise, if it formed a knot in his heart, it would affect his entire life. Therefore, it was better to help ease the atmosphere between the two of them. After all, what his junior sister had done just now was not presentable. Everyone knew what was going on, but she was still so aggressive. It was fortunate that young Master Yun loved his junior sister so much that he did not look into it. Otherwise, based on this stubborn and willful temper, it would be enough for the two of them to lose each other. Yunyang smiled faintly and said, "This is really something that can't be helped." At that time, Yunyang only wanted to achieve his goal and didn't think much more. Since the 9 Supremes are no longer there, the hundreds of millions of people of Yutong have been suffering from the flames of war day by day. If the 4 empires really joined forces to attack, the people of Yutong will be in endless trouble. Even if Gugu doesn't understand and even resents me, I still... His faint smile was overflowing with endless determination. Wei Xinglu nodded silently. Good man. Responsible man. There were things that a man should do and should not do. There were also things that he should do and things that he must do. Although he loved his own woman deeply, he also understood his own responsibility. No matter how much he spoiled his own woman, he would never be a simple slave to his wife in the future. Now, it was really rare to see such an upright man with a loyal heart and a clear distinction between gratitude and grudges. Gugu should really cherish him. Being so aggressive and hurling malicious words at him would only push him away. Ark. I'm so mad. Gugu could not hold it in any longer. She stood up and screamed at the sky, unable to vent the frustration in her heart. Gugu had always known that her eldest senior brother was wise and he doted on her like a little daughter. It was because of this that she could not understand what was wrong with him today. Why did he favor Yunyang, whom he had just met, so much? He didn't even allow her to defend herself. How preposterous. Could it be that he was drugged? However, she did not know that people like Wei Xinglu cared about Gugu very much. That was why he was more concerned about her marriage and did not want her to miss out on a good husband. That was why he was afraid that she would be too willful and ruin this great marriage. This was the excessive concern of older people for their children of the right age. Gugu? Wei Xinglu shouted sternly, "Stop fooling around." Gugu was so angry that she could not speak. She turned her head away and saw that Yunyang had turned his head over as well. At a place where Wei Xinglu could not see, he winked at her and made a funny face. The anger in Gugu's heart rose to another level. She saw stars and felt dizzy. "I'm going to die," Gugu moaned. Her delicate body slumped on the chair, feeling powerless. On the other side, Yunyang and Wei Xinglu had already begun to chat about everything under the sun. In the beginning, the two of them talked about the way of tea, and slowly they began to dabble in the way of chess, the way of the sword, and even exchanged fishing skills for half a day. After that, they talked about all sorts of things, and there was nothing they did not talk about. Wei Xinglu was even more surprised to find out that this young Master Yun was so knowledgeable. He knew almost any field and was even proficient in it. He only needed to start the conversation and Yunyang could continue to discuss with him in simple terms. Moreover, his views were unique and incisive. The more they talked, the more satisfied he was. The more he talked, the more he regretted not having met him earlier. Young Master Yun, it's getting late. Why don't we stay in your residence? We'll have a long talk some other day. Wei Xinglu had obviously regarded himself as a member of his maiden family. He directly asked for a stay here. Of course, I dare not ask. Yun Yang was pleasantly surprised. Well, you still have guests outside. You'd better go greet them first. Wei Xinglu smiled, looking at Yun Yang with eyes full of admiration and satisfaction. Yes. Eldest senior brother, please take a seat. Gugu. Yun Yang actually hesitated and said, Tonight, I've asked the kitchen to make your favorite fried double-flavored prawns. I've specifically asked them to pick out the spines and the thighs of the flying dragon bird. I've also asked someone to buy them. Go. I'm going out now. Yun Yang walked out of the room blindly. Gugu was infuriated. Before she could reprimand him, Yun Yang had already disappeared from her sight. Wei Xinglu's eyes were full of satisfaction as he said, Gugu, this child is really good. He even observes what you like to eat and what you pay attention to in detail. He's really good to you? Gugu covered her face, feeling like her intestines were tangled into a ball. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Eldest senior brother, you've really misunderstood, Wei Xinglu said sternly. I can allow you to fool around with other things, but this is a matter of marriage. It's related to the rest of your life. You have to listen to me. Do you understand? Gugu's eyes rolled back and she actually fainted from anger. I'll just die. There were arguments coming from the door, but the people arguing were deliberately suppressing the volume of their conversation. It was obvious that they did not want others to know about it. Don't mention this again in the future. Dong Tianling, I know your sister is beautiful, generous and talented. This is undeniable. After all, I've seen her real face. But I still can't promise you. Yun Yang's voice was suppressed, far away. If you hear, quickly shut up, don't talk about it anymore. Dong Tianling's voice was heard. Eldest brother, since my sister met you that day, she's deeply in love with you. She won't marry anyone but you. Even if she can't be the legal wife, she's still willing to be a concubine. Yun Yang's voice was heard. Dong Tianling, I've already told you very clearly. I only wish to be with two people in this lifetime. My heart has long been attached. How can I delay the life of a beauty? Do you really want me to be an irresponsible man? Dong Tianling said dejectedly. Sigh. Xia Bingxuan's voice was heard. Sigh. Dong Tianling, I've fallen in love with your sister at first sight. I'm willing to marry her as the legal wife. If you don't object, I'll send someone home later to formally propose marriage. Dong Tianling only had one word to reply. Scram. Chiu Yun-san said, Dong Tianling, what do you think of me? Other than being willing to marry your sister as the legal wife, I'm also willing to promise to be good to her for a lifetime. Both of you scram. And you Chun Wanfeng don't speak. If you want to speak, scram as well. Sigh, it's better for the four of you to scram together. Yun Yang's voice was filled with a sigh. I still remember what you've done. Sigh, I need to sort out my own affairs first before we talk about anything else. I'll look for you all in 2 days. You've all seen it today, it's not convenient for me to be here these few days. When things are done here, you all can stay at my house directly. I'll fulfill my promise to all of you as soon as possible. The 4 popinjays were overjoyed. That's great. Thank you, eldest brother. Dong Tianling then lowered his voice and said sympathetically, Eldest brother, women do need to be coaxed, but you can't spoil them too much. Honestly, I couldn't bear to watch what happened just now. Actually, other than my sister's slightly weaker cultivation talent, she's pretty good in every other aspect. Not only is she pretty and virtuous, her personality is especially gentle as water. Yun Yang said exasperatedly, can't you understand human language? Scram quickly, scram quickly. Scram as far as the ocean is. The 4 of them left, laughing and joking. The place where they were talking was quite a distance away from where Wei and Gu were staying. It was already at a corner outside the small yard. They were whispering in hushed whispers. Of course, Gugu could not hear them with her cultivation base. She was fuming with anger, her stomach bulging and her 7 orifices spouting smoke. However, what was Wei Xinglu's cultivation base? Although these voices were soft, all of them fell into the ears of this 10th-level perfection cultivator. All of the conversations were heard clearly. He could not help but sigh in his heart, thinking, this young Master Yun can be called a good young master in this chaotic world, a handsome young man with an outstanding appearance. Almost all men would be moved by him when they saw him. It's not difficult to guess how many girls would like such a hot commodity. However, he can be so devoted to one person. It's really rare and commendable. It was fine that Gugu was a little willful usually, but this time she must not be allowed to act recklessly. She needed to be taught a lesson. If she was allowed to act recklessly, she would definitely miss out on such a good son-in-law. Just talking about what she had done today in all fairness had already deducted a lot of points. Girls still needed to be a little gentler. Fortunately, young Master Yun was deeply in love with her and did not mind it much. He was really sentimental. Gugu was really a silly girl. How could she not know that it was great to be in love, but to be able to find a partner who loved her and was willing to tolerate her was the greatest blessing in life. Chapter 269. When Yun Yang walked out, the people from the four noble families were ready to leave. Obviously, Dong Tianling and the other three had followed Yun Yang's orders and left with their elites, waiting for Yun Yang to summon them. In the courtyard where Wei Gu and Gugu were, "Eldest senior brother, you must believe me. I have nothing to do with Yun Yang. I've been dressed as a man all along. No one knows that I'm a girl other than old Marshal Han. It's even more impossible for that Yun Yang to know. If he's targeting me, then he's a rabbit." Gugu explained hurriedly. Gugu. The eldest senior brother frowned and said sternly, "Do you know what you're saying? You're saying that Yun Yang is gay? That no one can tell that you're a girl? Do you even believe what you're saying?" Gugu said hurriedly, "I believe it. Why wouldn't I believe it? No one knows my real identity and no one knows that I'm a girl." The eldest senior brother held his forehead and said after a while, "Looks like I'm the one who should reflect on myself. I've been too lenient with you previously. Based on the fact that you're a girl, I can say with certainty that everyone here today can see that you're a girl. Are you still so sure that Yun Yang doesn't know that you're a girl?" Although Gugu was born in the school of spring and autumn and had an extraordinary background, her experience in the martial world was extremely shallow. She thought that her disguise was enough to fool people, but she did not know that her identity had long been exposed in the eyes of observant people like Yun Yang. Eldest senior brother was right. Everyone in the residence of Yun today, whether it was Fang Mafei, Lao Mei or the people from the four noble families, were all experienced in the martial world. How could they not see through her? Even Dong Tianling and the other four had long seen through her true identity as a girl. Their ability to see through it had nothing to do with their experience in the martial world. It was because the four of them were veterans who roamed the field of flowers. Gugu's disguise was not that brilliant either. The traces of a girl could be found everywhere. How could she hide it from these four people? Seeing that Gugu still wanted to refute, the eldest senior brother cut her off directly. "I'll take it that you're embarrassed. It's understandable that you're enraged because so many people have seen your private affairs. However, you should know when to stop. This matter concerns your lifelong happiness. If you don't know how to appreciate it and act recklessly, I'm afraid you'll regret it for the rest of your life when you don't have the chance to appreciate it." Wei Xinglu sighed softly and said, "You must know, flowers will bloom again but people will never be young again." Gugu held her forehead weakly. "Eldest senior brother, do you still remember the purpose of our visit? We're here to investigate Yun Yang's background. Was he the one behind the soul-locking needles incident? What should we do next? How should we deal with it? This should be the main purpose of our visit, right? Also," Gugu said angrily, "Eldest senior brother, why would you rather believe Yun Yang's nonsense than my truth? I'm your dear junior sister." Wei Xinglu's expression was still calm as he said faintly, "Then answer me first. How many times have you told the truth since you were young?" Gugu was stunned for a moment, speechless. Obviously, the eldest senior brother's words had hit the nail on the head. She had nothing to say and could not deal with it. "I'll answer your question now. About the matter you've mentioned. Is there still a need to investigate? Didn't Yun Yang admit it in public just now? He was the one who did the whole thing. What else do you want to investigate? The truth is obvious. Whether it's the motive, the means, or the person who handled it, it's all clear at a glance. It's reasonable and expected. Why do you still want to beat around the bush on this point?" Wei Xinglu looked at his junior sister with a very strange gaze. Obviously, he was doubting the intention of his junior sister to repeat the same old topic. Wasn't this too low-level or a little too brainless? Even if she wanted to change the topic, this way of changing the topic, it seemed like it would only make people wonder about her motive. Could it be that the legendary IQ of a man and woman who were passionately in love was true? Why didn't Yun Yang show any signs of it? No, for Yun Yang to be able to fancy such a junior sister and to be so devoted to her, it was already a sign that his IQ had dropped to 0 or even negative. He had to pack up his junior sister and give her to him. Otherwise, what else could he do? Gugu was dumbfounded. What but is there? Wei Xinglu said, the matter is clear. The purpose of our trip has long been completed. Haven't you figured out the crux of this matter? If this incident didn't involve the School of Spring and Autumn's unique hidden weapon, I wouldn't even care about it. The whole matter is still clear now. Our school's secret weapon art has not been leaked and the previous alarm has been completely lifted. The rest of the follow-up, how to do it, is the matter of Han Sanhe and the Empire of Dongxian. I won't interfere anymore. Because those people, those things, have nothing to do with us. Gugu, you must never forget your identity. You're from the School of Spring and Autumn, not a worldly traveler who's involved in the worldly dynasty struggle. You've come with Han Sanhe this time because of fate and coincidence. There's nothing else. I understand. Since it's over, let's leave immediately. I don't want to stay here for even a moment longer. Gugu was stunned for a moment, finally feeling dejected. She knew that her eldest senior brother's words were reasonable, but she could not wait to leave this place, to leave this strange place where the devil Yin-Yang was. This boundary was truly too strange. Previously he was completely confident that he could obtain many Kirin fish, but in the end, his efforts were in vain and he had wasted countless precious bait. Now, with just a few deliberate words from his silk pants, he had actually fooled the wise and far-sighted eldest senior brother into a daze. Right now the most important thing was to quickly leave. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Wei Xinglu smiled and said, we still have something to do. We still have to investigate. He Hanqing's side. Gugu said, I know, but if we want to investigate or deal with He Hanqing, we don't have to stay in this Yun's house. Wei Xinglu smiled and said, why not stay here? I think this place is pretty good. The black lines on Gugu's forehead increased. She could only feel the helplessness in her heart converging into an ocean. Eldest senior brother was too stubborn. Why couldn't you see that the one with the surname Yun was a movie king? No, it was only a movie king for eldest senior brother. She had long seen through his sinister face and would never fall into his trap. She did not know that Wei Xinglu was also sighing in his heart. Silly girl, I am creating an opportunity for you. Can't you see it? During dinner time there was nothing but awkwardness. Whatever Yin-Yang said, Gugu would respond with tit for tat. Eldest senior brother really wanted to smooth things over, but seeing that Yin-Yang did not dare to continue, he did not know how to smooth things over. After a moment of awkward silence, Yin-Yang changed the topic with a face full of smiles and continued to be targeted. Awkward silence again. It happened so many times that every topic could be continued. Gugu and Yin-Yang were probably at loggerheads. The more Wei Xinglu looked, the more he felt that there might really be a problem between this young couple. However, the problem must be on Gugu's side. Her temper was simply. Yin-Yang was her true love and had a good temper. If it were me, I would have long been unable to stand it. Wei Xinglu's gaze towards Yin-Yang became more and more intimate, mixed with a lot of sympathy. The dinner continued in an awkward atmosphere. Lao Mei suddenly called out softly from outside, young master? Yin-Yang stood up, what is it? Lao Mei did not answer. Yin-Yang excused himself and walked out. There was no more sound coming from outside. There's nothing that can't be said. Being so sneaky, he must be up to something again. Gugu curled her lips and used her chopsticks to stab at the dishes on the plate. She murmured, this Yun is full of evil tricks, all of them are conspiracies. Other than scheming, he's also deceiving people. Once she thought of a wise person like eldest senior brother being deceived by Yin-Yang the moment he came to Tiantang City. Gugu felt that the sky was filled with crows flying everywhere and the sky was filled with ink. This Yin-Yang was really too abominable. Wei Xinglu did not reply but closed his eyes and cultivated his mystical skill, concentrating on the content of Yin-Yang's words outside. His butler came over at this time and did not speak in front of him. There must be some private matters to report, and this matter was very likely to be related to the both of them. Yin-Yang hid very far away this time. Wei Xinglu cultivated all his cultivation base and finally heard a little sound. The two people on the other end stopped their footsteps. Yin-Yang's faint voice rang out faintly, what is it? Can't you see that I have a guest? Yin-Yang's butler's voice sounded very urgent. It's old Sir He who sent someone over just now. He said that he wants to invite young master over, there's something important to discuss. Old Sir He? Wei Xinglu's heart suddenly jumped. Could it be that He Hanqing? If so, then many of the things that had happened before were indeed related to He Hanqing. Yin-Yang's voice was obviously a little nervous. Why would old He send someone over at this time? Could it be that he found out that Gugu is here? Lao Mei said, but it's expected. Young master, it's really not that I want to say this, but this pair of senior brother and sister came here openly. Not to mention that the four noble families are all aware of their identities and origins, their whereabouts have already fallen into the eyes of those with ulterior motives. I'm more afraid that their presence here will hinder young master. Chapter 270. Lao Mei chuckled bitterly. Young master can say this to me, but young master, I'd better ask them to leave as soon as possible. It's not because of young master, who dares to doubt young master in the empire of Yutong. But our identities are still enemies, how can we coexist? Old sir, he has always been cautious, he doesn't allow for the what if and will definitely take action. If these two were to be killed on the way, it would be a great pity. Yun Yang's voice was filled with shock. That's right. What you said makes sense. I only wanted to keep the guests here and neglected this point. I do have this concern, but I've delayed their planned actions by keeping them here. Sigh. Don't sigh, young master. Old sir, he is still waiting. Young master should go over, perhaps you can fight for some time, or else. The butler's voice was worried. Old sir, he is one of the few people who can influence his majesty. Yun Yang's voice was sullen. I can't not see him this time. I must go over to greet him and slow down that old man's actions. Sigh, this bunch of old men, they don't let anyone have any free time. Lao Mei said, old he's starting point is also for Yutong's great cause, young master you. Alright, I'll go later. I'm eating with the guests now. How can I leave in the middle of the meal? Yun Yang was obviously angry. Old he is fine, he's old too, what's wrong with waiting? As he spoke, the sound of footsteps could be heard as he walked towards the room. Wei Xinglu retracted his deific consciousness silently, a faint smile on his face. The door opened and Yun Yang walked in. Sorry for the long wait. It's all right. Wei Xinglu was still smiling, but his smile was more sincere. On the other side, Gugu rolled her eyes and did not give Yun Yang the slightest bit of friendliness. At first glance, Yun Yang's expression looked the same as before, but how could Wei Xinglu not see that his heart was weighed down? After drinking a few more glasses of wine, Yun Yang suddenly asked, right Gugu, how many days can you stay in Yutong this time? Gugu rolled her eyes fiercely. Why do you care? I'll stay as long as I want, what if I stay for a lifetime? Gugu's original intention was to mock Yun Yang, but eldest senior brother Wei thought that Gugu had unintentionally spoken her mind. Stay for a lifetime? How dare you say you haven't fallen for the handsome guy? Yun Yang chuckled dryly and said, it's none of my business. You can stay as long as you like. Then he seemed to suddenly become alert and said in a deep voice, well, there's nothing much to do now. Why don't you go back earlier? Gugu scoffed, I can go back whenever I want. Do I need you to worry about this? Wei Xinglu saw Yun Yang sigh silently. After a while, he said with some difficulty, the world is not peaceful now. No matter where you are, you must be extra careful. Gugu replied coldly, if you have time to worry about others, you should worry about yourself first. Yun Yang did not speak again. He raised his goblet and said, cheers, cheers. It's not easy for us to gather. Let's drink till we're drunk. Gugu said, eldest senior brother, don't drink it. Who knows if there's poison in the wine? Yun Yang chuckled dryly. Gugu is too humorous. A fine wine poured from a wine pot. If there's poison, won't I poison myself first? The more Wei Xinglu looked at her, the more he sympathized with her. His junior sister was too willful, he could not stand it anymore. He raised his goblet and said, cheers, thank you for your hospitality, young master. If you have free time in the future, please visit the School of Spring and Autumn. There are many beautiful sceneries there. If young master comes, I am willing to be your tour guide and enjoy the beauty of spring and autumn together. Yun Yang's eyes brightened. That's a must. I haven't seen the boundless scenery of the School of Spring and Autumn for a long time. It's a pity that I can't see it with my own eyes. Gugu slammed the table. How dare you pollute our school? Gugu? Wei Xinglu said sternly, how can you say that? I'm the one who invited young Master Yun. What are you going to do about it? Gugu's eyes reddened. She was so wrong that she could not speak. She almost shed tears. Young Master Yun, please don't mind it. Looking at his junior sister who was about to cry, it was not that Wei Xinglu's heart did not ache, but it was not convenient for him to comfort his junior sister at the moment. He could only comfort Yun Yang first. Junior sister's family is outstanding, she's gifted and she's smart. She's been spoiled by my master since she was young. Yun Yang grinned and forced a smile. Gugu's character is generous and straightforward. Her words are unscrupulous. That's what makes her adorable. Wei Xinglu rolled his eyes. Everything about Gugu seemed to be better now. Love really makes people stupid. Even being scolded can give you pleasure. Wei Xinglu knew Yun Yang's difficulties. He drank continuously and deliberately sped up the banquet. He heard clearly that Han Qing still had something to discuss with Yun Yang. If he delayed here, he would inevitably hurt Yun Yang. In less than an hour, Wei Xinglu frowned and held his forehead. Alas, I'm getting old, I can't hold my liquor. I need to lie down and rest for a while. Yun Yang seemed to be relieved and said, all right. Then please have a good rest, eldest senior brother. I have something to deal with over there. I have to go out for a while. I'll be back soon. Young master, please go ahead. Wei Xinglu grabbed Gugu, who was about to speak, and almost dragged her towards the guest room. Little girl, don't provoke him anymore. He's such a good person. Again, if you really miss him, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Just as Yun Yang's foot stepped out of the door, Wei Xinglu's foot followed him silently. Eldest senior brother was not a greenhorn like Gugu. He had his own calculations and would not believe whatever he heard. As the saying goes, what you hear is false, but what you see is true. Of course, he had to follow Yun Yang to see what was going on. He was also quite interested in Han Qing. It was a good opportunity to meet this veteran of Yutong's 3 dynasties, the ruthless character who had almost killed Han Sanhe. Looking at Yun Yang and Lao Mei, the two of them walked forward in silence. Yun Yang's face was full of heavy entanglement. The sympathy in Wei Xinglu's heart increased out of nowhere. How old was this young man? Was he even 18 or 19 years old? He was only this young, but he had already been involved in the war of the rise and fall of the country, shouldering the responsibility that he should never have. What was even more pitiful was that for this responsibility, he had even sacrificed his own feelings. The reason why Gugu was so relentless in her harassment was because of the incident with the soul-sealing needle. All of this was out of helplessness. However, these pressures were all on the shoulders of this young man. How could he bear it? Just thinking about it made one's heart ache. Yun Yang walked for a while and suddenly stopped moving forward. Then he turned around abruptly, his gaze clear. Wei Xinglu was taken aback. This guy could actually feel someone tracking him? How high was his cultivation base? If he could even feel my tracking with this level of cultivation base, this innate spiritual sense was simply nature-defying. Fortunately, I was far away and his cultivation base was far from mine, so he wouldn't really be able to confirm it. In this way, Yun Yang had turned back many times to watch suspiciously along the way, making it extremely difficult for Wei Xinglu to track him. In the end, it had developed to the point where he could only follow him from a few intersections away. In short, it was extremely thrilling. However, Wei Xinglu relied on his profound cultivation base. Even if he was separated by a few intersections, he could still observe the general movement of Yun Yang from a distance with his deific consciousness. Finally, Yun Yang came to the door of the residence of He. Wei Xinglu was still watching from afar. He saw Yun Yang say a few words to the gatekeeper of the residence of He, and then both parties seemed to have an argument. Then he saw Yun Yang walk back angrily. This place was not far from the residence of He. There were many experts in the residence of He, so Wei Xinglu did not dare to release his deific consciousness to eavesdrop. Besides, the distance was too far, so even if he wanted to eavesdrop, he could not. Therefore, Wei Xinglu only saw Yun Yang arrive at the residence of He. It seemed that he had been reprimanded. Moreover, the gatekeeper looked like he was going to chase after Yun Yang. When Yun Yang turned around, his face was already full of anger, and his mouth was also muttering, as if he was scolding someone to vent his anger. What was going on? Could it be that the communication between the two parties was not good, and a quarrel broke out? Wei Xinglu memorized the location of the residence of He, but he quietly followed behind Yun Yang again. This time, Yun Yang was probably filled with anger, and his alertness was greatly reduced. The eldest senior brother came closer, but Yun Yang still did not notice him. It was because of this that Wei Xinglu could hear Yun Yang muttering curses. This is outrageous. Preposterous. He didn't even let me enter the door. Isn't it only an hour late? I also have guests to entertain, there's a reason for this. This is outrageous. He even wants to care about me looking for a wife. My father has never cared about me, what right does he have to care about me? Bullsh *T 3 generations of senior statesmen. If it weren't for the fact that he has so many high-level Yutong cultivators under his control, would he dare to be so arrogant? How dare you? How dare you? Along the way, Yun Yang had repeated the words outrageous hundreds of times. The anger on his face could break through the sky, and he looked like he was about to explode from anger. Young master, it's not without reason that old He doesn't want to see you. He's busy and indeed has no time to spare. He has waited for you for an hour, you can't blame him. You should have gone earlier. Lao Mei was persuading. Between his words, it was obvious that he had an unusual admiration for old he, and his words were also pointing out Yin Yang's faults. He's busy and I'm just an idle person? Besides, I've already guessed what he wants me to do. What's the difference if I do it earlier or later? Do you know what that old man wants me to do? He actually wants me to set up an ambush to deal with Gugu and her eldest senior brother. This is outrageous. This old man must be muddle-headed. Yin Yang was furious. This matter is indeed difficult for young master, but old he's action is also out of the public interest, not to deliberately make things difficult for young master. Young master should still pay more attention in the future. Speaking of this, Wei Xinglu had basically understood the current situation, and the context of the whole matter was clear. So this was the truth. This young master Yun was really a responsible and good man who valued relationships and righteousness. However, he was also furious in his heart. This He Hanqing actually wanted to go against him? However, what Wei Xinglu did not know was that although it was true that Yun Yang had gone to the residence of He, the content of the conversation with the guard was not what he had said or what Wei Xinglu had imagined. Is that old bastard He Hanqing here? Who are you? I'm your grandfather. Presumptuous. You watchdog, how dare you scold your grandfather? Chapter 271. If such words were said, basically, as long as it was someone on the opposite side, they would start quarreling. It was already a sign of the other party's shrewdness that they did not fight directly. Yun Yang had angered the gatekeeper half to death, and then he returned home. It was hard for him to pretend to be angry along the way. This was the acting of a best actor. Lao Mei watched from the side, truly feeling that it was not easy for his young master. How good was he at controlling his own expression and emotions to be able to perform so vividly and deeply? Of course, similar comments were also in Yun Yang's heart. The target of his praise was Lao Mei. He had not realized that Lao Mei's acting skills were so amazing. He had portrayed the image of a loyal servant who knew everything about his master, helped him, and prioritized the country, the people, and the family almost perfectly. His singing, speaking, learning, and singing were all incisively and flawlessly. It was truly outstanding. Yun Yang returned to the residence. He was surprised to find that Wei Xinglu was still awake, sitting under the flowering tree and drinking tea. The night breeze was gentle, and the fragrance of flowers wafted through the air. Wei Xinglu sat in the pavilion in a loose robe with big sleeves, looking rather otherworldly. It's already so late, why hasn't eldest senior brother rested yet? Yun Yang walked over with a smile. You're back? Wei Xinglu looked at Yun Yang meaningfully. I'm back. Actually, there's nothing serious over there. Yun Yang smiled. It's probably just that elder he wants to test me on my homework during this period of time. Wei Xinglu smiled. It's good that you're all right. It's good that you're all right. He let out a soft sigh and said, the night is long and there's no mood to sleep. I wonder if young Master Yun is interested in having a long talk with me? To kill this boring time? Yun Yang smiled. This young brother has the same intention. There aren't many opportunities to ask eldest senior brother for advice. He sat down and asked, intentionally or unintentionally, eldest senior brother, I wonder if there's anything to be done on this trip? This young brother has quite a few connections here, maybe I can be of some help to reduce some unnecessary entanglements. This boy feels the danger and wants us to leave quickly, but he doesn't know how to say it. It's really painstaking to speak in such a roundabout way. Wei Xinglu could see this clearly. He knew everything, but it was also because of this that Wei Xinglu felt a trace of warmth in his heart. This brat is truly concerned about us. Otherwise, why would he have to go through so much trouble? We do have something to do on this trip to Yutong. Wei Xinglu said gently, but this is not a big deal. It can be settled in a day or two. If there is nothing else, we will set off in a few days. Yun Yang heaved a sigh of relief before he said worriedly, doesn't that mean you'll be leaving soon? Why don't you stay for a few more days and let me show my hospitality as a host? This brat was actually still probing. It seemed like he was too worried. However, his quick wit and his words were watertight. He could be said to be intelligent. There are still other matters that need to be dealt with at the mountain gate. After this matter is settled, we will have to leave. It should be within these 2 days. Wei Xinglu simply gave a definite time. It will be a long journey. Please take care of yourself, eldest senior brother. Yun Yang seemed to be deliberating his words and said, the martial world is dangerous. You must be more careful. Wei Xinglu smiled with great interest and said, "Of course. When will the martial world's turbulence ever stop? The martial world's road is always full of ups and downs." Yun Yang hesitated for a while and finally made up his mind. He said, "Eldest senior brother, I'm afraid there will be ambushes along the way." You. Wei Xinglu looked at Yun Yang warmly. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Besides, I have a flying mystical beast. I can fly back with Gugu. Don't worry." Yun Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. He immediately said with relief, "That's good, that's good. That's really good." Wei Xinglu laughed heartily, liking him even more in his heart. He stood up, took 2 steps under the flowering tree and said lightly, "Young Master Yun is young and talented, and has great responsibility and spirit. I wonder if you have any further plans for your future?" "Future?" Yun Yang smiled and said in a profound tone, "I haven't really thought about my future yet." He thought of the burden he had on his back. For a moment he was at a loss and could not help but sigh. However, Wei Xinglu was wrong. He smiled faintly and said, "Are you at a loss?" "Yes, I am indeed at a loss." Yun Yang nodded and admitted, "High position and generous salary? Wealth and glory? Invincible in the world? Laughing proudly in the martial world? Above the clouds?" Wei Xinglu threw out a few paths in succession and said, "What if young Master Yun can choose these paths?" Yun Yang took a deep breath and said, "High position and generous salary are just a burden to me. The so-called wealth and glory are just fleeting clouds. As for being invincible in the martial world and above the clouds, these are too far away for me, too unrealistic. I only wish now." Yun Yang's gaze was firm. "Yutong's longevity, the country's prosperity, the people's peace, the world's martial arts cease. Peace of mind, righteousness, no regrets in this life." These words came from the bottom of Yun Yang's heart. They were genuine and sincere, genuine and pure. Wei Xinglu was in awe and said, "Young Master Yun is benevolent and virtuous. You care about the common people. You are indeed a man with lofty ideals." Yun Yang smiled bitterly and said, "What kind of man with lofty ideals? I don't have such a high level of awareness. It's just that in life, there must always be some pursuits and some responsibilities. As a man he must be worthy of heaven and earth, brothers, family, conscience and the country." Yun Yang said frankly, "Let's be a man first, then we'll talk about other things." Wei Xinglu pondered and said, "Young Master Yun has put the country last. Is it because you have no intention of ranking or is it intentional?" Yun Yang smiled, "Perhaps eldest senior brother doesn't know that I, Yun Yang, am a selfish person. I can't abandon all my family and loved ones and only worry about the country and the people. The ancients say, cultivate the moral character, govern the family, rule the country and bring peace to the world. Isn't it still before ruling the country and bringing peace to the world? I know very well what kind of person I am. Therefore I have my own pace for my own goals. Even if I'm at a loss, the road ahead is still clear." Yun Yang said softly. Wei Xinglu was silent for a long time and said, "Then, does young Master Yun have any specific plans for his beauties?" Yun Yang was also silent for a long time before he replied, "Eldest senior brother, can we not talk about this?" Wei Xinglu smiled and said, all right, let's not talk about it." He sat down and said, "Our school of spring and autumn is one of the top 10 ancient sects in the Tianxian continent. The orthodoxy that has been passed down has been in the world for tens of thousands of years. My senior and junior brothers of this generation, any one of them is also an outstanding talent. However, we are far from being the backbone of this school. Because above us there are master, uncle master, uncle master, uncle master, all the way to the founding master. My junior sisters are also stunning beauties, each of their identities is also enough to be prominent for a time. Just like my youngest junior sister Gugu's." Wei Xinglu looked at Yun Yang meaningfully and said, "Gugu's family background is even more outstanding among the junior sisters. Our sect's position in the cultivation world can be said to be transcendent. Even if it's those junior sisters who come from a more ordinary background, they're not people that the genius disciples of the various sects can easily covet. If they really want to get close to them, there are often many obstacles. In this world, fate is undoubtedly important. However, nothing is absolutely fair and there is no such thing as giving and receiving." Wei Xinglu was obviously also choosing his words. After a pause, he slowly said, "I think young Master Yun has also been prepared for this." Yun Yang was silent for a while and said, "The world is chaotic, the road ahead is rugged. Try your best and move forward. If in the end you can't catch up and there is nothing you can do." As eldest senior brother said, Giving does not necessarily mean that there will be receiving. As Yunyang said this, he smiled bitterly and said, "But if you don't give, there will definitely be no receiving." Wei Xinglu laughed heartily, "That's right. However, whether it's a gain or a loss, you have to maintain your original intention and also have a normal heart. These two hearts cannot be lost." Yunyang said lightly, "As long as it has been obtained, even if it is destined to be lost, it is also a lifetime of happiness. The so-called eternal moment is nothing more than this." As Yunyang said this, the faces of the 8 brothers flashed in front of his eyes one by one. "Yes, we are brothers. We have had such a period of time together. So this period of time in my memory will never fade, nor will it be obliterated. It will exist forever and it will always be there. Being together with the 8 brothers was the greatest happiness of my life." The true feelings revealed in Yunyang's eyes moved Wei Xinglu greatly. Obviously, this eldest senior brother had thought in the wrong direction again. It was just that this eldest senior brother had almost never thought in the right direction when it came to Yunyang. Perhaps he had gotten used to it after being wrong for so long. There is nothing in this world that cannot be done. It only depends on how high you can go in the present and in the future. Wei Xinglu encouraged Yunyang vaguely. Yunyang nodded in agreement. After experiencing so many changes, Yunyang could be said to have a personal understanding of Wei Xinglu's words, and he was deeply moved. Both of them talked about national affairs, from the world hegemony to the martial world, from the martial world to the martial world, and from the martial world to the noble families and sections. From the few big sects that dominated the martial world, to the hidden sects, to the legendary sects, to the heroes of the world. The more they talked, the more they regretted not having met earlier. Wei Xinglu's eyes looking at Yunyang also became more and more satisfied, and more appreciative. This young man was intelligent, witty, loyal, magnanimous, hot-blooded, responsible, ambitious, knowledgeable. He was indeed a rare talent, a genius among geniuses, enough to lead the group and look down on his peers. Talking until the 3rd watch, the two of them were a little tired. Yunyang suddenly asked with some embarrassment, "May I ask, eldest senior brother, this path of martial arts, above 10th perfection, what other realms are there?" This was the biggest doubt in Yunyang's heart. Chapter 272. Wei Xinglu chuckled and said, "There is no end to the path of martial arts. How can there be such a thing as perfection? If it is really perfection, how can there be any higher realms?" Yunyang scratched his head, not knowing how to reply with a bright face. The so-called 10th perfection realm is nothing but an erroneous way of saying that the secular people know about the path of cultivation and their own cultivation base. Wei Xinglu chuckled and said, "However, the saying of the 9 peaks and 9 heavens does make sense. Only by climbing a mountain can one see the sky on the other side of the mountain. But in the end, one can only see it. To see the whole world, one must climb a higher peak. However, there are very few people in this world who can climb mountains and reach the top. As for those who have already climbed to the top, they wouldn't have the leisure to come back and spread the news. Therefore, the path of martial arts has always been shrouded in fog. Just like us, the major sects, although we know the mystery, our disciples will not take the initiative to say anything. Although there are elements of self-preservation, there is no lack of disdain to say that it is not easy to sage. After all, some realms, once you reach it, you have reached it. You have not reached it, you have not reached it. This could not be faked at all. There is a clear distinction between understanding and not understanding, understanding and not understanding." Yunyang listened quietly. The path of martial arts, in the world of Tianxian continent, is confirmed by the major sects to have a total of 3 barriers. The first is the saying of the 9 peaks of martial arts. In the major sects, it is called the peak realm. Most people, when they cultivate to the level of the 9 peaks, have already reached the pinnacle. Under normal circumstances, most of the cultivators who reach this stage are already old and unable to make further breakthroughs. However, once one surpasses the realm of the 9th peak and reaches a higher level, which is what the secular people call the 10th perfection realm, he will reach a whole new realm. His cultivation base will experience a leap. It is also at this point in time that the cultivator will experience a process of being reborn. Some of the martial artists who are clear-minded and have extraordinary temperament will be able to experience the phenomenon of rejuvenation during this breakthrough, allowing their aged bodies to regain their youthfulness. With this breakthrough as the starting point, we call it the heaven realm. It is also the 9 heavens realm that I mentioned just now, a starting point for the beginning of the cultivation journey again. Do we have a better understanding now? To the people in our sect, Only when we break through the so-called Great Completion realm can we be considered to have truly stepped into the heavenly realm and entered the first heaven. Then, you continue to advance until you reach the 9 heavens. It's another process of going from low to high. But from the literal meaning, the 9 heavens is like ascending a mountain, and the 9 heavens is like ascending to heaven. Yun-yang could not help but sigh and said, so this is the true meaning of the so-called one mountain is one heaven. The heaven realm is the realm that most cultivators can never step into in their lifetime. It is indeed the heaven realm, it is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Wei Xinglu said faintly, as difficult as ascending to heaven? This is both right and wrong. For high-level cultivators, there is nothing difficult about the heaven, but each heaven of the 9 heavens is truly difficult to ascend. Actually, the saying of one mountain is one heaven cannot be completely wrong. It is just a far-fetched joke made by some people who do not fully understand it. Our sect has talked about this before, and it must have been something that some people who reached heaven realm said out of inspiration. They placed mountain realm and heaven realm together and they're both 9 heavenly realms, but because of that, it created ambiguity, causing others to feel as if they understood it but not really. They thought that there was a heaven in each mountain. Even though this is the truth to normal cultivators, to the powerful cultivators, it's just a joke. Yin-yang was silent. This was because he had been living in such a joke for so many years. As for the realm above the heaven realm, there is still the realm of Tao. Wei Xinglu suddenly laughed bitterly and said, however, regarding this realm of Tao, I only know its name. I don't know what level is involved in this realm. My cultivation base is too far away from that realm, I can't even say that I am a frog in a well. I have asked the elders in the sect about the mystery of this realm, but they said that it is not a good thing to know in advance. When I reach the realm I will naturally know. So the path of martial arts is really long with no end to speak of? Wei Xinglu said, the realm of Tao as far as I know, is the end of the Tianshan continent. However, there must be a higher level above the realm of Tao. But I have no idea of more mysteries. The only thing I can be sure of is that, even if there are another 100 levels, it is still far from the end of martial arts. Wei Xinglu said word by word, the path of martial arts cultivation has no end and no end, only a beginning. The next day, Wei Xinglu brought Gugu out. Yun-yang did not ask what the two of them were going to do as long as he was left alone. This show had been going on for the whole afternoon and the whole night. No matter how good an actor was, it was still tiring. Could it be that they have gone to the 1,000-feet lake? Yun-yang frowned and shrugged, still not giving up, huh? Although Yun-yang thought of this, he no longer paid attention to it. One had to know that during this period of time, he had gone back and forth to the 1,000-feet lake several times. He had already made it clear that the king of Kirin fish would never let any Kirin fish appear in the 1,000-feet lake, at least in the short term. Yun-yang had absorbed the magical smoke 3 times during this period of time. He had already grasped the experience that the thing would only appear once every 10 days, or it might not even appear at all, on this morning. A group of strange martial arts experts entered Tiantang City in a single file. All the high-level cultivators in Tiantang City instinctively felt as if the air in the entire Tiantang City had suddenly become oppressive. It was an eerie feeling, even if it was a sunny day, the eerie feeling was still so clear. It was as if the gates of hell had suddenly opened and all the evil spirits had poured into the human realm. Even the sky above Tiantang City was suddenly shrouded by a large number of dark clouds, covering the sun and the sky. The clear sky was no longer clear. Yun-yang was most familiar with astronomical phenomena. As he observed the changes in the sky and felt the sudden eerie atmosphere, he could not help but have an intuition. Could it be that the concourse of the underworld has come out in full force? It can't be so serious, can it? In the afternoon, Yun-yang received a note sent by a gust of cold wind. Behead He Hanqing tonight. The note was filled with speckles of light. The moment Yun-yang finished reading it, it suddenly burst into flames and turned into ashes. Behead He Hanqing tonight? Yun-yang frowned, pacing back and forth in the yard. The concourse of the underworld was finally going to strike. However, would it really be so easy? If the saber was not here, it should not be a problem to kill He Hanqing. The concourse of the underworld's power was also at its peak. It should be possible to send a few kings to deal with Supreme Lord Spring Frost. As long as these kings had the cultivation base of First Court King Qingguang, it would be fine. However, there was an additional saber now, and this saber was even stronger than He Hanqing's. It would then be difficult for the concourse of the underworld to kill He Hanqing. Perhaps they would fail on the verge of success. However, this is a godsend opportunity for me. Perhaps there will only be one chance to kill He Hanqing. How can I miss it because of the concourse of the underworld's misjudgment? Yin Yang frowned. Confirm if Wei Xinglu and Gugu are really at the 1,000-feet lake. Lao Mei agreed and left quickly. Bai Yixue, Yin Yang said quietly, tonight is the time for you to show off your skills. Bai Yixue's expression was as bitter as a gourd. He still could not avoid this mission. Forget it, he would fight with his life. The residents of Old Sir He Hanqing, felt that he had been extremely unlucky recently. No, it should be an unprecedented misfortune. First, he did not know what was going on. Ling Xiaozue, whom he had not seen for a long time, had come looking for him. He did not even have a basic reason to do so and had beaten him up so unreasonably. Honestly, He Hanqing had not figured out what was going on until now. What Ling Xiaozue had said then was actually a pretense. You, Ling Xiaozue, have long known about these things. You have countless times to deal with me. Why did it have to be now? He had injured himself in an instant and then floated away. What kind of explanation was this? The whole thing was bewildering and inexplicable. He Hanqing had even hoped that Ling Xiaozue would directly reveal his identity as Supreme Lord Springfrost so that he would have room to refute. He did not need Ling Xiaozue to believe him. It was enough as long as people other than Ling Xiaozue believed him. As long as Ling Xiaozue put the fact that he was the Four Seasons Tower's hall master on the table, someone from the tower would naturally come forward to deal with him. He did not need to worry about keeping his guard up anymore. However, Ling Xiaozue's target was He Hanqing now, not Supreme Lord Springfrost. The Four Seasons Tower's high-end forces could not intervene. Once they did, it would be the Four Seasons Tower who had broken their agreement first. Ling Xiaozue's ability was too strong. He Hanqing was helpless and could only suppress his anger and focus on recuperating. However, just as his recuperation was getting better, the residence of He suddenly caught fire. The entire residence was destroyed by the inferno. Not only did the conflagration come abruptly, it was also not an ordinary fire. If it had been an ordinary fire, He Hanqing could have extinguished the fire with a few palm strikes from the high-level cultivators under him, turning water into mist or stirring up a gust of wind. However, the conflagration was futile, be it the wind or sprinkling of water. He could only watch helplessly as the residence of He was engulfed in flames. He Hanqing had initially suspected that it was Supreme Flame's doing, but there had been no movement after that, so it was hard to make a conclusion. Even though He Hanqing was hiding in the secret room and wasn't affected, he was still disturbed by this sudden change. Moreover, he was on tenterhooks and was unable to calm his mind, causing his internal injuries to become even heavier. Finally, after some time of peace, Bai Yixue had jumped out of nowhere. Chapter 273. This fellow had tried to assassinate him head-on in an even more inexplicable manner. Just from this alone, it was obvious that this fellow did not know who he was. He had been manipulated by someone else. Based on the situation at the time, this fellow had the identity of Han Sanhe's bodyguard, so he had naturally targeted Han Sanhe and launched a counterattack. Although he had killed all of Han Sanhe's entourage, he had gained nothing. Analyzing it in detail, the incident did not benefit Han Sanhe at all. Could there be a third party or even a fourth party behind the scenes? Even with such a conjecture, there was no way to investigate it. After all, there were so many things that were tangled up in a tangled mess. He had thought that his counterattack, targeting Han Sanhe and Bai Yixue one after the other, would be effective as a warning. He had not expected the people around him to perish one after another. Many of the Hall of Springs subordinates had died, but he could not find the culprit. Involving the Jianghu people and matters of the Jianghu was enough to give He Hanqing a headache. However, during this period of time, for some reason, the emperor had become unusually distant from him. Even the crown prince seemed to be gradually distancing himself from him. There was also the matter of the Shangguan family of generals that he had tried so hard to stir up, hoping to shake Yutang's military's rock-solid morale. However, a nameless pawn had killed his men with a thunderous attack. Others might not know, but how could He Hanqing not know? Among those who had been killed, there were his men from the Four Seasons Tower. Those were his true subordinates of the Hall of Spring. They had perished in that incident inexplicably. After going through such a series of events, He Hanqing had a feeling that there was a pair of eyes watching him from a hidden corner. No matter what he did or how he moved, it could not be hidden from this pair of eyes. It would be targeted at him, aimed at his vitals. This force must belong to the 9 Supremes. It could even be one of the 9 Supremes. However, no matter how Hanqing had tried and how many strategies he had come up with, he had not been able to uncover this person or this force. Not even the slightest clue could be found. This old man has roamed the martial world for so many years, and I've always been confident in being careful and cautious in my plans. However, this is the first time I've encountered something like this. Compared to this opponent, this old man would rather face Ling Xiaozue. Although Ling Xiaozue is strong and difficult to fight, he has a clear target and a countermeasure. However, the hidden person is a complete stranger and ignorant. How can I deal with him? I can't do anything at all. Yi Hanqing lamented. At this moment, there was a skinny green-clothed man in front of him. The green-clothed man seemed to be shrouded in a green mist, and his face could not be seen at all. There was only a sharp blade chi circling around his body. Although he couldn't see the person's face clearly, he gave off the feeling that he was smiling gently. He picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea. He said calmly, "My lord, you may be too concerned about that person. Although the changes in front of us are annoying, they are still trivial matters. If you don't take it seriously, you won't care about it. It's because the Supreme Lord is concerned that you find it difficult to deal with and imagine the enemy to be exceptionally tricky. However, if you let it go, for a period of time, this person will most likely expose himself. Now we can be sure that the other party has a grudge against the Four Seasons Tower. They won't rest until one of them is dead, and it's impossible for them to coexist. They've also confirmed your identity, so they'll definitely come again and target you. As long as the Supreme Lord is here, they'll come again and again, again and again. As long as they come again, they may be able to conceal their tracks once or twice, but can they hide perfectly forever? As long as they reveal any flaw, the other party's defeat is inevitable. Sooner or later, the Supreme Lord's place will become their burial ground. Could it be that the forces of the Four Seasons Tower's Hall of Spring can't annihilate a bunch of small fries in a head-on battle? The green-clothed man smiled faintly. Yi Hanqing chuckled bitterly, the muscles on his face twitching uncontrollably. This fellow spoke so casually and cheerfully. He had used him, Supreme Lord Springfrost, as bait, and yet he could speak so confidently. Moreover, from what he had said, as long as he was not dead, he would have to do the job of bait again and again. Even if this was the truth, there was no need to speak in such a manner. Venerable Lord Saber is skilled and bold. Of course you wouldn't care about this. Yi Hanqing's old face was filled with loneliness, but this old man is already old. It's strange that the older one gets, the more afraid of death one gets. Especially when I was severely injured by Ling Xiaozue's sword previously, this old man really felt that I'm getting old and frail. How could I stand being targeted by the other party? The green-clothed man sneered and said, "Does Supreme Lord he feel uncomfortable about the fact that I've used you as bait?" Yi Hanqing pulled a long face and said lightly, "How would I dare? Venerable Lord Saber is one of the founding elders who had followed the boss to start his family. I, Hanqing, am only a deacon and I'm getting old and frail. How would I dare to be dissatisfied with Lord Saber?" The green-clothed man's voice was sonorous, like a sharp blade being unsheathed. Yi Hanqing, you have to know the key to the current situation. Only you can lure the remnants of the 9 Supremes to attack us. The most important part of our 1,000-year plan is to completely annihilate the 9 Supremes. There can't be any mistakes in this plan. The previous plan was already so thorough, but it was still incomplete. The boss is already very unhappy. Yi Hanqing said coldly, "No one would want the boss to be unhappy. However, this old man thinks that I've done my best in formulating the previous plan. How can I be reconciled to the oversight of the specific implementation?" The green-clothed man snorted coldly, "Do you dare to say this in front of the boss?" Yi Hanqing was silent for a moment before he said coldly, "This old man only has 18 years left to live." The green-clothed man's expression changed abruptly. He flicked his sleeves and stood up, saying, "This is your fate. What does it have to do with others?" Yi Hanqing chuckled coldly and did not speak again. The green-clothed man snorted. His body suddenly flashed, and a flash of saber light flashed as he disappeared. He actually left just like that. Without saying a word, he flicked his sleeves and left. Yi Hanqing sat still for a long time. His face was calm and expressionless. However, after a while, the teacup in his hand suddenly shattered with a loud bang. The 2 people outside seemed to have heard the strange noise. They pushed the door open and entered. "Supreme Lord?" Yi Hanqing said coldly, "Where are the subordinates of Venerable Lord Saber now? There are 12 of them nearby. As for the rest, they are waiting outside the city." Yi Hanqing took a deep breath and said eerily, "They are all outside the city. How can they listen to orders from nearby? Send my spring edict, ask them to come to the residence of He for defense." Yes, but they may ask about the specific details of the operation. Just say that it's necessary to lure the enemy. They are only responsible for sniping the incoming enemy. When they come, bring your men and go into the dark. Wait for the opportunity to move. Do not let the enemy take advantage of you. Your own safety is the priority. Yes. Open the secret chamber later. This old man wants to recuperate in isolation. Do not disturb anything until this old man opens his isolation. Yes. He Hanqing's aged silhouette disappeared from the room. The news spread. The saber light flashed in the air and disappeared. No matter how reluctant He Hanqing was, he had still accepted the task of being the bait. Although sending his own men here was not only to increase the safety factor, it was also to bring disaster to the fish in the moat. However, Venerable Lord Saber did not mind at all. To him, He Hanqing's surrender was the most important thing at the moment. Perhaps, to him, nothing and no one was more important than annihilating the 9 Supremes. He Hanqing's life was so, and so were the lives of his subordinates. Venerable Lord Saber, there is one thing that I don't understand. Speak. Even if you didn't say so just now, this bait could only be He Hanqing. But why did you bring it up right in front of me? Do you want to ask, why did I use such a tone and attitude to provoke He Hanqing? Yes, this subordinate is slow-witted. If I don't provoke him, he will be the bait. If I provoke him, he will still be the bait. No matter what, this is his mission and he can't escape it. The reason why I wanted to provoke him in front of him was not to remind him of the fact that he was the bait, but because, since he can't escape the fate of being the bait no matter what, exposing it in front of him will only make him feel more disgusted. Venerable Lord Saber smiled coldly. In the 4 Seasons Tower, the 4 Supreme Lords are all advanced in age. Their cultivation base has not improved, and their lifespans are nearing its end. They have long been unable to keep up with the pace of expansion of the tower. However, their authority is too heavy. Although no one can deny their experience and wisdom, their hearts no longer have a radical impulse. The few people in front of him all lowered their heads. No one dared to rashly interrupt this topic. The more one knew about the game between the higher-ups, the greater the danger. In the blink of an eye, it was already the second half of the night. He Hanqing's residence was quiet as far as the eye could see. The sound of a clapper came from afar, indicating that it was already the 3rd hour of the night. It was when the night was at its darkest. Inside the residence, there was a sudden movement in the shadows. A person stood up. Today is the first day here. Could there be an uninvited guest visiting so coincidentally? Didn't Supreme Wind of the 9 Supremes just settle Yang Guotao's matter? Will he really make a move so soon? This person was obviously a little tired. He had been waiting outside the city for so many days and had almost exhausted all of his mystical qi while setting up the formation. He had finally rested for half a day before receiving the order to come to the residence of He to assist in the defense. He was simply too tired. Chapter 274. Yes. He let out a warning roar, but before he could roar it out completely, a cloud of sinister mist suddenly appeared in front of him. The fog was eerie and terrifying. Swoosh. A bony white hand stretched out from the fog and grabbed his neck, silencing his warning roar. The cultivation base of the person who wanted to warn him was not weak. He could see the other party's appearance and approach. He could only watch as the other party attacked. However, there was no room for him to evade or struggle. His neck was strangled by the other party. The hand did not slow down after successfully strangling the man. It continued to exert force. The man's neck began to crack. He could not even muster the mystical qi in his body. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, a fish on the anvil. This anomaly had alerted the other night watchmen. Swoosh, 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 more than 20 silhouettes jumped out from the shadows. Who is it? Put him down. The fog on the other side surged as an eerie voice asked, "Where's He Hanqing?" The eyes of the person who was being strangled bulged out. His throat gurgled but he could not speak. The fog suddenly let out a long howl, its voice piercing through the clouds. He Hanqing, your old friend is here. Come out and receive the guest. In the air, a strange chuckle could be heard. F*** King Hell, you've been to too many brothels. Receiving the guest the moment you open your mouth. Even if He Hanqing is willing to come out and receive the guest, your father wouldn't dare play. Your father's taste isn't that heavy. The 4 Seasons Tower's experts were shocked and enraged. Since the other party had spoken so harshly, it meant that today's matter was not going to end well. With a loud cry, more than 20 of them pounced forward. The big hand exerted force and with a crack, the neck in the hand suddenly broke. Then the hand threw the lifeless corpse away with a tyrannical force. Immediately, a figure in hemp clothes and a tall hat walked out of the fog step by step. With a clang, a 9-section whip appeared in his hand. The 9-section whip shook in the night and turned into an azure dragon that shook its head and wagged its tail. It rolled endlessly and charged at the more than 20 people in front of it. Its momentum was earth-shattering and vigorous. At the same time, a dense dark cloud shrouded the entire He residence. The 20-odd men from the He residence felt chills run down their spines when they saw this. One of them screamed, "First Court King Qingguang? How could it be you?" The figure with the tall hat did not respond, but continued to laugh strangely. The green dragon transformed from the 9-section whip rushed into the crowd. Puff, 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 the sound of blunt weapons colliding with flesh could be heard. The three figures flailed their arms and legs as they flew up, struggling desperately in midair. It was clear that although they had been hit by the 9-segment whip, they were injured but not dead, and there was still room for survival. Unexpectedly, another silhouette flashed out from the dark clouds in the sky. A cold and gloomy voice sounded for the second time. "He Hanqing, aren't you coming out?" As he spoke, a phosphorescent light that flickered with a ghostly fire suddenly flashed. The three figures that were struggling endlessly instantly stiffened and fell to the ground with a soft thud. They were like corpses that had decayed for 8 to 10 years, leaving only decaying skeletons without any flesh. When they flew up into the sky, they were still breathing and could still struggle, but when they landed, they were completely decayed skeletons without the slightest sign of life. "Second Court King Chujiang?" The remaining 24 people exclaimed once more. Then another shout rang out, "Get into formation." Since the two Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld had arrived at the same time, coupled with the fact that they were ruthless killers, it was a matter of life and death. It was imperative that they quickly gathered their manpower to save their own lives. Everyone was experienced in battle. They moved in unison, gathering together like a whirlwind. In an instant they converged into two circles. The bigger circle encircled the smaller one, spinning rapidly. The combined strength of 24 people resisted the green dragon's vigorous momentum. As the green dragon let out a long howl, it was blown away by the attack and turned back into a 9-jointed whip, flying back softly. It was obvious that the combined force of the 24 men was more powerful than the 9-jointed green dragon that First Court King Qingguang had unleashed. First Court King Qingguang caught the 9-jointed whip and bellowed, "How dare you hurt my divine weapon? You're courting death." Before his words echoed in the air, the 9-jointed whip shook again, crackling like firecrackers. In spite of this, the 24 people who had formed a formation were like one, advancing and retreating together. Even when faced with King Qingguang's consecutive attacks, they did not seem to be at a disadvantage. Just when First Court King Qingguang's repeated attacks were futile, a flash of saber light shone in midair. A large saber quietly materialized in midair, heading straight for First Court King Qingguang. The silhouette in the dark clouds in the sky appeared once more, saying in shock and doubt, "Isn't this the person with the saber? Is this He Hanqing's place or not?" With a loud thud, the hall of the residence of He suddenly opened. The hall of the residence of He suddenly opened. At least 30 people rushed out of the hall like a swarm of bees, their weapons unsheathed while their torches illuminated the surroundings as if it was daytime. Far away, with a flash of saber light, a man in green appeared high in the sky, looking down at the saber's shadow that had suddenly appeared at the residence of He and smirked coldly. "They're here in such a hurry. Let's go back." The green silhouette turned into a saber light and disappeared in a flash. Behind him, 18 silhouettes appeared one after another, chasing after the saber light and leaving swiftly. First Court King Qingguang's relentless attacks were futile. He grunted in exasperation, gathering and waving both of his hands. Immediately, the nether fog surged out like a tidal wave. The 9-jointed whip was still dancing, circling in the nether fog, the wind howling as it grew louder and louder. It was obvious that he wanted to rely on his own strength to take down the 24 experts from the other side at the same time and defeat the enemy. Unexpectedly, King Chujiang's cold cry came from midair, "The saber is here." Then a cloud of nether fog spread out rapidly. A silhouette appeared out of thin air and said, "All of you continue here, I'll go stop the saber." It was the Third Court Emperor Song himself who had materialized and left swiftly. Following his movement, the sky above the residence of He became even more overcast, looking gloomy and eerie. Ghostly cries could be heard as the wisps floated in the air, drifting here and there at a rapid speed, like 100 ghosts walking in the night, as if hell was about to descend upon the mortal realm. The saber light was swift, approaching the sky above the residence of He in the blink of an eye. However, a person arrived abruptly, with his hands behind his back and a crown on his head. He stood in front of the saber light calmly and elegantly. A gloomy voice said, "Venerable Lord Saber has graced us with your presence. Why don't we stop for a chat?" Venerable Lord Saber and the man in green were shocked, shouting, "Emperor Song? You're here too." 3 Yama kings have arrived at the same time. Is the concourse of the underworld officially declaring war against the Four Seasons Tower? Emperor Song shook his head and said helplessly, "I've been tricked by someone with ulterior motives. I know that this is difficult, but I have no choice. Come, let me have a good chat with Brother Saber." Venerable Lord Saber said coldly, "You're not my opponent. Step back quickly. I don't want to become a sworn enemy of the concourse of the underworld." The ghostly fire in Emperor Song's eyes flickered. A cloud of ghastly fog burst out from both of his eyes, crackling in front of his eyes. Electric arcs were constantly floating and flickering in it. He said in a gloomy voice, "Not your opponent? Venerable Lord Saber, where do you get your confidence from?" Emperor Song's body spun abruptly, the crown on his head suddenly emitted rays of white light. A golden sword that was emitting a yellow glow suddenly appeared. As soon as the sword appeared, it immediately scattered into sword light that filled the sky. Then, thousands of yellow sword shapes formed a formation in the air, the majestic sword energy firmly locked onto Venerable Lord Saber. The thousands of sword shapes that were derived from the golden sword formed a triangular sword formation. All the long swords were still in the air, their tips slightly trembling as they neatly aimed at the saber light of Venerable Lord Saber's body. This group of swords, like a well-trained army, lined up neatly in the air. Countless cold glints from the tip of the sword actually separated from the body of the sword, converging into a cold halo like the bright moon in front of them. Third Court Emperor Song said faintly, "Venerable Lord Saber, do you dare to enter with your saber?" Venerable Lord Saber's expression suddenly turned extremely ugly. He had fought with the Emperor of Song before, and the latter was slightly weaker than him. That was why he had said that he was not a match for him. He was not boasting shamelessly. Unexpectedly, when they met again today, the other party's sword formation was so strong that it was enough to make him look askance. Although he was not afraid, if his saber were to enter the sword formation hastily, it would definitely be shattered. However, if he were to enter the formation with his saber, what he would have to face would evolve into a battle of life and death. In the end, whether it was Emperor Song who killed him or he himself who killed Emperor Song, it would inevitably lead to an extreme war between the two forces. Such an outcome was not something that the Four Seasons Tower would be happy to see, especially at such a critical moment. It must not happen. Below, cries of agony could be heard incessantly. Obviously, the arrival of Venerable Lord Saber had caused First Court King Qingguang to stop acting on his emotions and join hands with King Chujiang to slaughter the guards of the residence of He. "Ask your men to stop first." Venerable Lord Saber took a deep breath and slowly lifted the tip of his saber. His knuckles were white as he said coldly, "Don't push things to the extreme. Although the Four Seasons Tower has no intention to destroy the concourse of the underworld, it's not impossible. Emperor Song, don't be so ungrateful." Emperor Song sneered but did not reply. Suddenly, 2 silhouettes appeared beside him. It was King Yin Luo and King Zhuan Luin who appeared beside Emperor Song. "So what if we don't know what's good for us? I wonder what Venerable Lord Saber can do to us?" "King Yama, King of Chakra? Even you guys are here?" Venerable Lord Saber's pupils shrunk. Below are King Chujiang and King Qingguang. The concourse of the underworld is really generous this time, actually sending 5 kings at once. Could it be that they are determined to go against the Four Seasons Tower? Emperor Song smiled faintly. Venerable Lord Saber's statement is only half correct. You're wrong. If we only send 5 people to stroke the whiskers of the Four Seasons Tower, how can it be considered as being determined to go against the Four Seasons Tower? Venerable Lord Saber's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly howled towards the sky, "He Han Qing, come out." Chapter 275. The concourse of the underworld had put up such a big fight. It was obvious that they would not stop until they had achieved their goal. If there were only 5 of them, would the concourse of the underworld really think too highly of He Han Qing by coming here with 10 Yama Kings? Now that there were 5 of them, if the other Yama Kings were here as well, then where were the rest of them now? Emperor Song sneered and did not stop Venerable Lord Saber from leaking the news. Since things had come to this, he could only catch them all in one fell swoop. He Hanqing had just sat down in the mystical crystal formation when the four guardian masters around him held their breaths and began to channel their mystical chi to activate the mystical crystal formation to help He Hanqing heal his injuries. However, just as the purple light flickered, signaling the activation of the healing formation, there was a sudden bang. The 100 pieces of mystical crystals in the center suddenly burst into a pile of fragments. A sharp voice rang out, "He Hanqing, it is destined to be useless to heal yourself now. Come, 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 follow my soul-reaping chain. Your time has come." A cloud of netherworld fog suddenly filled the entire secret chamber. Another mountain seemed to appear out of thin air, pressing down fiercely. The four guardians around him roared angrily and retaliated at the same time. King Taishan. He Hanqing sat upright in his original position, his expression calm. However, his pupils suddenly contracted. Looking at the sudden attack in the void, his two hands slowly crossed in front of his chest. His entire body suddenly emitted an unprecedentedly strong aura. A palm flipped out, and the huge mountain that had just pressed down turned into nothingness with a bang. That huge mountain that had suddenly appeared seemed to have form and substance, as if it was a real entity. Against an ordinary person, it would indeed be no different from a huge mountain pressing down on them. However, against He Hanqing, who had a stronger cultivation base, it was not enough. It was just a head-on collision with his palm, and the mountain immediately collapsed. It was clear who was stronger. A silhouette snorted, "Supreme Lord Springfrost really lives up to his reputation." Then a disdainful voice said, "Am I living up to my reputation?" Following this voice, a pale white sword suddenly rushed out from the netherworld fog. Like a white steed passing through a crack, it came to He Hanqing's throat in an instant. "King Pingdang?" He Hanqing exclaimed. Obviously, he did not expect the two Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld to appear at the same time in the secret chamber. Not only did they come so suddenly, they even joined forces to attack him. He let out a muffled groan. His entire body floated up in an unusually light manner, dodging the Prince of Equality's swift sword by a hair's breadth. Then He Hanqing's face turned red. He suddenly raised his head and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. However, his aura did not weaken because of the blood he spat out. Instead, it climbed to its peak. Following that, a series of puff, puff, puff noises resounded continuously. He Hanqing's palms collided with the Equality King's sword for more than a dozen times. Both of them let out a muffled groan and retreated respectively. Concourse of the underworld. The Yama King made his move. This was tantamount to an impending death. Although He Hanqing didn't know why this group of people would come to him and start a deadly trap, He Hanqing was very clear that he was now at a critical juncture of life and death. Therefore, he immediately activated the art of soul ignition and burned 10 years of his lifespan to suppress all his injuries in an instant. He had to fight with all his might. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to survive. If he did not do so, then this day next year would definitely be his death anniversary. Although it was a pity to lose 10 years of his lifespan, as long as he could meet Mr. Nian, there was still a chance that these 10 years of lifespan could be made up for. However, if he could not deal with the current crisis, he would immediately become a corpse. How could he talk about the future? Get out! He Hanqing let out a loud shout and straightened his body. His body that was originally in a hunched state suddenly became straight and upright. His beard fluttered as he struck out with his palm like a bolt of lightning, creating a passageway that led to the surface in the secret room. The strength of his palm was incomparably powerful. The people from the concourse of the underworld had arrived, and it was the Yama kings who had personally made their move. This secret chamber could no longer be relied on. Instead, it had become a blessed place for the Yama kings of the underworld to set up their killing trap. In order to fight for a chance of survival, the most important thing now was to get to the surface immediately. Who would have thought that as soon as the path was opened, a strange laugh could be heard. A gust of chilly wind actually followed the path that had just been opened and flowed in the opposite direction. Go back! With a loud explosion, He Hanqing's hands trembled as he tumbled backward. His face was pale with fright. Yo! How many people are here? Why is this happening? A man dressed in gray with a crown on his head could be vaguely seen. He Hanqing, your time is up. We will serve justice on behalf of heaven and bring you back to the netherworld. Nonsense. He Hanqing was furious. The Four Seasons Tower and the concourse of the underworld have never interfered with each other. What is the reason for you to suddenly attack this old man? Is the concourse of the underworld going against the Four Seasons Tower? It was the same question again. Obviously, in the hearts of the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups, no sect or force in the Tianxian continent would dare to provoke or attack the Four Seasons Tower. However, today was obviously an exception. The man said eerily, "We are acting by the will of heaven, abiding by our duty to accept those who deserve to die into the cycle of reincarnation, only to serve justice on behalf of heaven. What do you mean by not interfering with each other?" An eerie command rang out, "Where are the concourse of the underworld soldiers? Hurry up and bring He Hanqing into the cycle of reincarnation." The ghostly cries in the air grew louder. Countless eerie silhouettes filled the residence of He in an instant. Not only were they in the air, but they also occupied the eaves and the ground, filling up the entire place. Cries of agony could be heard from all around. This was obviously a large-scale, indiscriminate strangulation, and it seemed to be killing them all without leaving any survivors. Although the Four Seasons Tower's experts in the residence of He were not few in number and their cultivation base was not bad, facing the concourse of the underworld's assassins in addition to the participation of many Yama kings, the difference in strength between both sides was too great. It was not that the Four Seasons Tower was too weak, but He Hanqing cherished his life the most. During this period of time, despite the continuous loss of manpower, the Four Seasons Tower's Hall of Spring had a strong foundation. Most of the men they lost were exposed to the public, and the loss of high-end combat power was limited. Now that He Hanqing was recuperating, it was only natural that all the elite troops that could be mobilized were gathered. In addition to the elite subordinates of Venerable Lord Saber, such a scale of force would not pose any threat unless it was an attack by a top expert like Ling Xiaozue, not to mention that Venerable Lord Saber was watching from the side. If there was an extreme situation, as long as Ling Xiaozue did not come personally, he would definitely lend a helping hand. However, He Hanqing had obviously missed out on the concourse of the underworld. He would never have thought that the concourse of the underworld would shed all pretenses of cordiality with the Four Seasons Tower and launch a forceful attack. Furthermore, their lineup was so extravagant that it was outrageous. Among the 10 court Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld, there were already as many as 7 of them. In the sky, Emperor Song, the King of Hell, and the King of Chakravarti formed an insurmountable line of defense, causing Venerable Lord Saber and the rest to stare at them helplessly, unable to do anything. In the midst of the battle, the Four Seasons Tower's men were constantly falling from the sky. The rumbling sound caused the entire earth to tremble. Obviously, not only did Venerable Lord Saber's side not gain the upper hand, they were at a disadvantage. The situation of the battle was not optimistic at all. On the other side, as the command was given, in addition to the movement of countless ghost soldiers, 2 illusory silhouettes appeared in mid-air, accompanied by gusts of chilly wind. One had a bull's head and the other a horse's face, holding onto the soul-reaping chain. As they approached, the bull's head and horse's face appeared as well. The atmosphere of the battlefield was filled with ghostly chi, the chilly wind howling. Poof, poof, poof. Another 17 silhouettes fell to the ground, screaming in agony. Although there were a few who were lucky enough to survive, their heads were immediately separated from their bodies. The concourse of the underworld's assassins were the most meticulous in observing the life and death of their targets. How could they not know if they were dead or not? How could they not die? Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, they would investigate after chopping off their heads. At this moment, the murderous intent of the few Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld who were targeting He Hanqing grew. First Court King Qingguang laughed maniacally, the 9-segmented whip in his hand once again turning into a cloudy green dragon. Bang bang bang, as the silhouette of King Qingguang's dragon reappeared, the last few men from the Four Seasons Tower had their brains ruptured amidst the ghastly fog, their souls leaving the netherworld. With a long, furious howl, a silhouette flew out from the ground like a bolt of lightning, breaking through the ghastly fog and ascending into the sky. The person was dressed in a scholar's robe. Although his face was old, his hair was white, and his face was filled with rage, he still exuded a scholarly aura. It was He Hanqing. As a scholar's grandmaster, although he still looked as tall as a mountain, he was actually trembling slightly, a trickle of blood trickling down the corner of his mouth. Why? Why are you doing this? He Hanqing's eyes were fixed on First Court King Qingguang. First Court King Qingguang had put in the most effort in this battle, cheering loudly for a fierce battle. Therefore his current condition was not much better. Even his royal robe had been torn in many places, his clothes ragged and his hair disheveled. Fresh blood dripped from his chest, indicating that he was injured as well. However, he was not bothered by it at all. He cackled strangely. He Han-Ching, your time has come to an end. Your soul should go to the netherworld. He Han-Ching said furiously, Bullsh *T. First Court King Qingguang, this tower has been allowing the concourse of the underworld to flourish for so many years, there has never been any enmity between us. The oath of alliance is still fresh in my mind. What is the reason for your sudden attack? He let out a long howl. Emperor Song. Give me a reason. The long sword in Emperor Song's hand shook suddenly. A mountain of swords appeared in front of Venerable Lord Saber. He immediately retreated, his gaze focused on He Han-Ching as he said faintly, He Han-Ching, the concourse of the underworld's actions this time are merely following the rules. Don't you know what kind of place the concourse of the underworld is? They accept money to buy lives, they accept money to eliminate disasters for others. Since the concourse of the underworld has accepted the silver, you He Han-Ching must die. Venerable Lord Saber, who was behind him, said faintly, Then what about the Oath of Alliance? Emperor Song said, The Oath of Alliance with the Four Seasons Tower is but a piece of waste paper. Don't you know that it's full of nonsense? As the saying goes, money makes the devil push the millstone. As long as there's enough money, the devil can be driven. You're talking about principles and contracts with ghosts. That's your unwisdom. What does it have to do with ghosts? Chapter 276. However, both He Han-Ching and Venerable Lord Saber were still full of doubts. The concourse of the underworld and the Four Seasons Tower had never had anything to do with each other. The Martial World Pact had long established that the higher-ups of the Four Seasons Tower were all listed in the exemption list of the concourse of the underworld. The so-called Martial World Pact could, of course, be a piece of paper and could not be counted. However, the prerequisite for it not to be counted was that the party who broke the pact was strong enough to bear the consequences of breaking the pact. Unless it was not completely considered, it was better to abide by the pact. It was better not to break it if possible. After all, it was never a good or trivial matter to always be on guard against the other party's counterattack, plot, ambush, and revenge. This was especially so when the people of the concourse of the underworld knew that although they were strong and powerful, they inevitably paled in comparison to the Four Seasons Tower. In that case, why would there suddenly be such an operation today? It was impossible to cover up this move. Even if He Han-Ching and Venerable Lord Saber were to be silenced, it would be useless. The traces of the concourse of the underworld's actions were too obvious. The Four Seasons Tower would definitely find out after this. With the Four Seasons Tower's temperament, both parties would fight to the death. The concourse of the underworld, who was at a disadvantage in terms of strength, could only be defeated. Emperor Song had said that Venerable Lord Saber was unwise, but in the eyes of Venerable Lord Saber and He Han-Ching, the concourse of the underworld was the unwise one. No matter how confused He Han-Ching and Venerable Lord Saber were, the battle would not stop just because of their doubts. In the blink of an eye, a few more screams were heard. The last few subordinates of Venerable Lord Saber had also died tragically in the hands of the other Yama kings from the concourse of the underworld. On the side of the Four Seasons Tower, other than Venerable Lord Saber and He Han-Ching, there were only a few survivors. The situation was irreversible and almost a foregone conclusion. In this battle, the elites of the Hall of Spring had been slaughtered. The King of Equality appeared in the air with a face full of pity, murmuring, "Sin, sin." He mumbled, "This life has been evil, I have come to expiate. There is no enmity between life and death. This life is over, but there is still the next. Go now, the gates of hell will open." Venerable Lord Saber took a deep breath. Emperor Song, the Four Seasons Tower will never let this matter go. The concourse of the underworld will regret this. You have money, but you have to live to enjoy it. He turned around and shouted, "Let's go. If Venerable Lord Saber wishes to leave, we will not stop you." Emperor Song's expression was indifferent. However, His Excellency Supreme Lord Springfrost needs to stay. He said calmly, "You don't need to leave too much. Just a head is enough." He Han-Ching chuckled, a ruthless glint flashed across his eyes as he said, "The concourse of the underworld has only sent 7 kings and 2 envoys here today. At most, there are a few gold-ranked assassins. I and Venerable Lord Saber admit that we are no match for such a combat power. However, if you think that you can keep me here with just this, it will be your wishful thinking." Emperor Song placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Whether we can do it or not, we will only know after we try. What do you think, Supreme Lord He?" With a flash of saber light, Venerable Lord Saber moved swiftly to He Hanqing's side and said coldly, even if this reputed one has always been at odds with He Hanqing, I will not sit back and do nothing as a colleague of the Four Seasons Tower at this juncture of life and death. He said coldly, Emperor Song, I believe you can see that although we are at a disadvantage today, it is only He Hanqing alone. If you want to kill him, you will have to pay with the life of one of the 10 of you brothers. If this reputed one were to join in, he. Venerable Lord Saber sneered and said, even if you can kill He Hanqing in the end, at least 3 of the 10 Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld will be reduced. I can also guarantee that I will be able to retreat unscathed. After all, I am not like He Hanqing who is severely injured. Such a clear situation, can't you, Emperor Song, see through it? It's fine if you kill an ordinary expert of the Four Seasons Tower, but if you kill one of the 4 Supreme Lords, you have to think about the consequences. Emperor Song stood in the air with his hands behind his back. His gaze was resolute and he did not speak. Of course, he knew that what Venerable Lord Saber said was the truth. Everyone had already reached this level and no one could lie to anyone else. Between each other, there was no one who could brag to each other. The situation was as such, simple and clear as day. There was no doubt that his side had an overwhelming advantage in this battle. There was no doubt about it. If there was only He Hanqing alone, 10 of them working together and paying a certain price was guaranteed to be able to kill him. Now, however, there was an additional Venerable Lord Saber. If they really wanted to kill He Hanqing, they would need at least 2 to 3 people's lives to be able to do it. Yes, it was only possible to do it. Moreover, Venerable Lord Saber could not be left behind. They were all experts of the same level. It was not difficult to join forces to intercept and defeat the other party, but to kill the other party without paying the same price, the difficulty would increase by more than 10 times. Based on the current combat strength, it was absolutely impossible. Emperor Song's expression was as calm as ever. While he was still contemplating in his heart, he saw a person from his own camp rushing forward. There's nothing more to say. He Hanqing's time has come to an end. He must return to his position today. First Court King Qingguang had already made his move. As he did so, King Pingdeng, King Taishan and King Chujiang attacked in unison. The 4 of them had covered the entire sky with the ghastly fog. 2 silhouettes loomed in the ghastly fog, appearing and disappearing unpredictably, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. They were Oxhead and Horseface, the twin envoys of the concourse. He Hanqing was enraged. It was the first time in his life that he had encountered such a muddle. What price had the person who had bought his life offered? Why would the concourse of the underworld be so reckless as to target them at all costs? Even the scheming and cunning Hanqing was baffled. It was hard to imagine. However, the other party attacked again. He Hanqing had no time to think. With a long howl, he attacked with all his might. What price can kill me, He Hanqing? He Hanqing asked sternly after exchanging a blow with First Court King Qingguang. While they were speaking, First Court King Qingguang was the first to rush forward, indicating that he was the most desperate. The most desperate person was usually the one who had accepted the payment and agreed to the mission. Since he could not think of it, he might as well ask. You want to know? First Court King Qingguang chuckled strangely. He Hanqing's eyes flared with ice and fire at the same time. His secret technique had been activated. The countless forces of souls that he had devoured over the years were all activated. Are you going to tell me or not? First Court King Qingguang chuckled and said, He Hanqing, your old life isn't cheap at all. 1 million silver taels. I've only given the other party a 20% discount, so it's a deal at 800,000 silver taels. 800,000 silver taels? He Hanqing was at a critical juncture in his cultivation, and he was besieged by the 3 kings. When he suddenly heard the price, he was so furious that he felt dizzy. I, He Hanqing, am only worth 800,000 silver taels? If you had said 3 to 5 taels, that would be an insult to me and I wouldn't be angry. If you said it was tens of millions of silver taels or millions of gold taels, or even hundreds of thousands of mystical stones and mystical crystals, it would still make sense. But what about 800,000 silver taels? Your concourse of the underworld has sent out dozens of gold-ranked assassins, 10 Yama courts, and 2 emissaries at the same time, all for 800,000 silver taels? Does this mean that your evaluation of me, He Hanqing, for 800,000 silver taels is already more than worth it? A lowly life can be sold for 800,000 silver taels. It's so worth it. Kill him quickly or else he'll regret it. This is the biggest insult. A gust of sword energy rushed up from within his body. Just as he was in a trance, he could no longer suppress Ling Xiaozui's sword energy. He Hanqing spat out 3 mouthfuls of fresh blood with a cry. A black fog dissipated around him. All the forces of souls that he had devoured throughout his life had dispersed at this moment. 800,000 silver taels? He Hanqing had been defeated in an instant. He Hanqing, do you think you're worth that much? First Court King Qingguang guffawed. 800,000 silver taels is already a high price for your lowly life. He Hanqing was infuriated, spitting out a few more mouthfuls of fresh blood as he tried his best to parry the attacks. However, King Qingguang and the other 2 kings attacked with all their might, completely suppressing He Hanqing into a disadvantageous position where he could only take a beating without being able to retaliate. First Court King Qingguang, you're courting death. With a flash of saber light, Venerable Lord Saber dashed forward. A silhouette flashed. King Song stood in front of the saber light in an elegant manner, his sword energy soaring into the sky. Venerable Lord Saber, we're not done yet. Venerable Lord Saber was enraged. King Song, don't you regret this? With a flash of saber light, Venerable Lord Saber's body disappeared without a trace in an instant. What appeared in front of everyone was a saber. The saber in the sky had revealed itself for the first time. A thick saber that was over 30 meters long lay across the sky, and it shone with a brilliant light. It was like a brilliant sun had suddenly appeared in the sky, and it illuminated the world, causing it to shine with an extraordinary aura. King Song took a deep breath. Stop him with all your might. Let the 4 of them finish off He Hanqing first. King Yinluo and King Zhuanluan responded to his call and moved forward. King Song waved his long sword, becoming one with it as he faced Venerable Lord Saber head-on. In terms of cultivation base, King Song and Venerable Lord Saber were roughly on par. It would be difficult to determine the winner or loser in a one-on-one fight within a short period of time, at least they would not be at a disadvantage. However, being evenly matched was one thing, being able to kill the other was another. As for completely restraining the other's movements, it was not the same thing. It was impossible to do so. Even if King Yinluo and King Zhuanluan were to unite, the situation was still not optimistic to fully restrain Venerable Lord Saber. The current situation was clear. Once Venerable Lord Saber could not be stopped and was allowed to rush over, allowing him to join forces with He Hanqing, then the operation of the concourse of the underworld tonight would be a complete failure. The concourse of the underworld had practiced for a few times in advance for this operation. It could be said that they were determined to succeed in this operation. He Hanqing would definitely die, there was no chance of survival. However, it had never occurred to them that Tiantang City had an additional Venerable Lord Saber whose cultivation base was higher than He Hanqing's. This change was too unexpected, causing a fatal flaw to appear in the concourse of the underworld's perfect ambush. For so many years, Venerable Lord Saber had never appeared here. According to the concourse of the underworld's information, there had always been animosity between the 5 Venerable Lords and the 4 Supreme Lords. Although they minded their own business, they were not on good terms with each other. However, these 2 people had suddenly joined forces to fight. This change was unimaginable, far beyond their expectations. However, this change had happened right when they were on the move. The 10 Yama kings of the underworld felt like they had just been F***ed. Chapter 277. The battle went on and the situation escalated. Waves of attacks that were more intense than the previous appeared one after another. He Hanqing kept spitting blood in the battle. However, this spitting blood was not due to a mystic art similar to the art of soul ignition. It was because the sword energy that Ling Xiaozui had left in his body could no longer be suppressed. With 4 strong enemies surrounding him, his life was at stake. He could only use the art of soul ignition once more, but there was a limit to how much it could be used. He did not have much time left in his life. Even if he did not fight this time, he was already close to death. Unless Mr. Nian helped him or he broke through on his own, he could die any time in the next 18 years. Now, however, he had used the art of soul ignition twice in a row, and his 18 years of life had been lost. He was basically at the end of his rope. Facing the siege of the 4 Yama kings from the concourse of the underworld, the atmosphere of the battle was intense. Even though He Hanqing had used the art of soul ignition for the second time, allowing his cultivation base to return to its peak state, his mystic art had inexplicably collapsed. He was still no match for the 4 kings. Another drawback of the art of soul ignition was that it could only destroy the enemy for a short period of time. His combat strength could not be sustained and would only deteriorate. He Hanqing fought as he moved, wanting to escape while his combat strength was still strong. However, King Qingguang and the other three kings were hot on his heels. A long howl could be heard. The saber light flashed, striking the sky. Venerable Lord Saber had gone all out. With a sharp whistling sound, the shining saber light suddenly arrived in front of Qingguang Wang and the others. In the next moment, the saber light was like a crystal ball suddenly exploding in the air, scattering saber chi all over the sky. It actually completely blocked the four people's pursuit. Venerable Lord Saber had finally broken through Emperor Song's blockade and rushed over to provide support. Go quickly. Venerable Lord Saber urged anxiously. Needless to say, the moment the saber light flashed, He Hanqing had already turned into a wisp of white smoke, speeding away into the distance. At this point, Supreme Lord Springfrost's combat strength was still at its peak. The speed of his escape was as fast as lightning. Venerable Lord Saber let out another roar. Once again, the dazzling saber light exploded in all directions. With his strength alone, he had blocked the pursuit of 7 Yama kings. He Hanqing ran all the way, but in the blink of an eye, he had already rushed out of the space of 10,000 feet. Unexpectedly, the air in front of him suddenly became dense, and 3 people appeared side by side out of thin air. These 3 people were dressed in hemp clothes and wore tall hats. Their faces were cold, but their bearing was completely different from the 7 Yama kings on the other side. An immeasurable amount of chilly wind followed the appearance of these 3 people. Almost at the same time, an overwhelming amount of saber light and sword shadows rained down. He Hanqing, leave your life behind before you leave. I knew you were hiding in the dark. He Hanqing let out a long howl. His figure, which was flying at an extremely fast speed, suddenly changed direction in an impossible situation. He abruptly soared into the sky and his speed did not decrease. Instead, he increased his speed, leaving a trail of white smoke behind him. He swept past the heads of the 3 kings. The defense line that the 3 Yama kings had set up was completely ineffective. No, there was a sudden burst of sword light above the defense line of saber and sword, giving chase. Its speed was even faster than He Hanqing's escape speed. In the blink of an eye, He Hanqing let out a muffled grunt. A streak of blood appeared along with the pursuing sword light. A long bloody wound appeared on his back, but He Hanqing's escape speed did not decrease at all. In an instant he was already 1,000 feet away. At the juncture of life and death, He Hanqing had gone all out. He did not slow down just because he was hit by the sword. *CK. The 3 people who came out were the last 3 of the 10 court kings, King Wuguan, King Bianqing and King Dusher. The 3 of them were obviously surprised by the current change. They had thought that their ambush was foolproof, intercepting the other party's escape route. Unexpectedly, the other party had already been prepared and found a way to escape at the critical moment. Even after being hit, he could still continue to escape without slowing down. He was indeed one of the 4 supreme lords of the 4 Seasons Tower. Of course, the 3 of them were unwilling to stop. They turned around and gave chase. However, He Hanqing had taken the lead and had already unleashed his full speed. It was clearly unrealistic for the 3 of them to catch up to him. A moment later, the saber light flickered continuously. It was the Venerable Lord Saber coming from behind. The speed of the men from the concourse of the underworld was obviously not as fast as the Venerable Lord Saber who was riding on his saber. Even though they were trying their best to catch up, they were gradually falling behind. Everyone from the concourse of the underworld was speechless. This mission was a complete failure. This was the first time the concourse of the underworld had sent out all 10 of its Yama kings, but they had yet to complete the assassination mission. What a joke. She was so embarrassed that she could die. What the F***? First Court King Qingguang was in hot pursuit as he cursed, "Are we F***king idiots from the concourse of the underworld?" There were so many of us, but he still managed to escape. As the brothers chased after him, they shot murderous gazes at him. "You're the one eating shit. Out of so many brothers, you're the only one eating shit." That was Supreme Lord Springfrost. "Why didn't you say that so many people were killed by Ling Xiaozui? After this mission is over, I'll definitely beat that doghead to death when I get back." He Hanqing sprinted against the wind, feeling the mystical chi in his body being depleted and his life force disappearing continuously. However, there was no fear in his heart. As long as he was still alive, there was hope. Now that his tracks had been exposed, it was destined that he would not be able to stay in Tiantang City. This time, with the justifiable reason of the concourse of the underworld's pursuit, the boss would definitely think of a way to help him recover. Not only would his life be prolonged, the sword energy that Ling Xiaozue had shot into his body might also be removed. Thinking about it this way, this pursuit was not only a crisis but also a hopeless situation for him. It was also a turning point, a new realm for him to start all over again. Right now, his biggest mission was to survive. His chance of survival was right in front of him. As long as he was still alive, everything would not be a problem in the boss' hands. He was running at his fastest speed, like a meteor chasing after the moon, like a thunderbolt piercing through the sky. Suddenly his expression changed. The wind in the air was whistling, and there were actually two sharp wind whistling falling down from above. Be careful. Venerable Lord Saber, who was far behind him, narrowed his eyes. However, it was too late. The other party's momentum was actually faster than He Hanqing, who was in a state of extreme speed. The speed was so fast that He Hanqing could barely react. He Hanqing let out a wild cry. His body glowed with a golden light. All the offensive and lethal weapons that he had on him were thrown out at the same time. Both of his palms pushed out brazenly towards the sky to counterattack. With a loud bang, a sharp eagle's cry rang out. Feathers flew everywhere in the air. A huge black eagle swayed as it flew out diagonally. However, He Hanqing's right hand, along with his arm, had been ruthlessly grabbed. The fact that the 9th-level mystical beast had not been killed on the spot when He Hanqing was caught off guard was already a testament to He Hanqing's strong foundation. He Hanqing howled in pain. The pain of having one of his arms torn off by the black eagle was heart-wrenching. However, just as he let out a blood-curdling screech, his face suddenly turned ashen and filled with despair. A bright light shone before his eyes. The sword light flashed like a thunderbolt. It came head-on. Not only did the sword come abruptly, the speed of the sword was so fast that it was hard to describe. He Hanqing's attack had only just passed. His old strength had already been used up, but his injuries had worsened. Moreover, the attack was too fast. It was difficult for him to turn his body in such a hurry. How could he evade this sword that was as fast as lightning? With a wild cry, he desperately twisted his waist and moved his body slightly to the side. With a swoosh, a sword pierced through He Hanqing's lower abdomen with an unstoppable force, creating a transparent hole in the front and back. The momentum of the long sword did not stop. Mixed with blood light, the wind and thunder were still howling. It continued to press on towards Venerable Lord Saber, who was behind him. With a loud clang, Venerable Lord Saber's saber light flashed and collided with the sword. The sword hummed and flew away with a stream of light, landing somewhere unknown. In front of He Hanqing, there was an additional middle-aged man in a green robe. The newcomer had an elegant face. The sword had already left his hand, and there was only a fishing rod in his hand. However, as the newcomer moved, the fishing rod had already turned into a violent storm, outlining an infinite murderous aura. The boundless shadow of the fishing rod had completely shrouded He Hanqing. He Hanqing, go to hell? The newcomer was Wei Xinglu. Wei Xinglu had originally brought Gugu to fish at the 1,000-feet lake. However, after a whole night, not even a single fish hair was seen, let alone the Kirin fish. The entire 1,000-feet lake was like a stagnant pool. How would they know that since Yun Yang had repeatedly warned them, not only would the Kirin fish not take the bait, even ordinary fish species were difficult to be caught. If they had used ordinary bait, perhaps they could still catch fish. Now, in the 1,000-feet lake, the more special the bait, the harder it was to catch fish. This was also a magnificent scene after Yutong, a spectacular sight. Wei Xinglu, who had waited for a whole night without any harvest, was bored. He wanted to bring Gugu back to the residence of Yun, but he suddenly heard a fierce fighting sound. A gust of wind blew the sound over. He Hanqing. Someone was besieging He Hanqing? Wei Xinglu's heart thumped. He was skilled and bold. He did not care about the danger here, so he simply came over to see if it was true. As a result, along the way, Gugu suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't the person being hunted He Hanqing? Yutong's literary school, the leader of the Confucian school, old Sir He?" Wei Xinglu's interest was immediately piqued. It was really him. He had originally wanted to find trouble with this old man. Now, before he could even go, how could he encounter an opportunity to beat a drowning dog? However, the opportunity was right in front of him. If he did not make a move, it would be a waste of this opportunity. Wei Xinglu pushed his hand, sending Gugu to a secret place to hide with a gentle force. Then he rushed forward without hesitation. A man and a hawk struck at the same time. Their joint attack was definitely above the level of 10th perfection, and it was precisely at the delicate moment when He Hanqing was rushing out of the encirclement. Especially this sword, It was a classic example of being unpredictable. He Hanqing had been dreaming his whole life, but he had never experienced such a nightmare. The 10 kings and 2 envoys of the concourse of the underworld had already appeared, but there was still such a person waiting here. Wei Xinglu could be said to be a pure, fresh force. No matter which side of the battle it was, no one had expected that there would be a third force intervening here. A sword pierced through the lower abdomen. A successful strike. This was the real, fatal strike since the siege on He Hanqing. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.